Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We are so glad to have you all here because we're in for a good time. Author, researcher John Koerner is here, and we are going to be hanging on out with him, talking about everything from JFK, RFK, and a bunch of assassination attempts, even though we're not allowed to use those words, but we're going to use them anyways. Why? Because we're rebellious that way. Dirty Filth is here with another amazing cartoon about to come at you. And, of course, we have each and every one of you. Tim Mothman in his goatee in the gold medal position. Race fan with a silver. Kitty Cattywack taking home the bronze medal tonight. Robert Lamoth. Little Cam on YouTube just did 800 jumping jacks in 12 minutes to warm up for John tonight. He's pretty warmed up. Get him some water if you don't mind. Necessary Dialogue. Mel WD-40 is here lubing us up for tonight's show because you always want to go into a show nice and smooth. You don't want any of that rigidness, especially when you're talking about conspiracy theory. Thank you, Mel, for the lube. Mama Catherine, I love you, my dear. I hope you're having a wonderful night, and I hope you enjoy this show. I really do. Okay, Little Timmy James. Little Timmy James will be signing autographs after the show. Line up to the left of the studio, if you don't mind, to the left of the studio. Scrolling on down, we say hello to Adam B. Number 47 in your program tonight. Starting at left wing from Stockholm, Sweden, Lars Jansson. T-Bone, my man. How you doing? Good to see you. Flat 6. Thanks for coming on in. Road Flare. Good to have you here as we continue on with our roll call tonight. Scrolling on down, we have Thomas Rock. And who's next on our list? The lovely and talented Kira. Nice to see you. You know what? It's been a while. Kira is going to be signing autographs after the show as well. Line up to the right of the studio if you don't mind. To the right of the studio. Paramarv, nice to see you. Thank you for coming on in as we continue on with our roll call tonight. Scrolling on down, let's say Frankie B, Bar Madison, Radio Wendigo. Nice to see you all here. And who's next on our list? Magneticus Attractus. Good to see you in the studio. Thanks for coming on in. Hi there, Matthew Goodka and Xanos. Bobbert, my man, how you doing? Good to have you here. So we continue on with our roll call here. Algaray over on Twitch, 2,500 sit-ups in 4 minutes. His stomach is looking like a major, major clothes washing ramp. Yeah, you remember those Grandma used to use for sure. All right, scrolling on down, we say hello next to Chill Farm. And our friend Richard Minnick. How you doing, my friend? All right. Wolverine, good to have you back. And Phineas over on X. Thank you for joining us. I'm Hardcore over on X. Good to have you here. And yeah, I'm Hardcore. Wants Little Timmy James's autograph. So, Timmy, you better find your pen. Just so you know, Tim's freaking out right now because he only signs in blue Sharpie. Only signs in blue Sharpie. Yeah, that's a request of his. Millennium, my man, how are you? Rock and Rory, good to see you as we scroll on down. Next, there's Kurt M. Good to have you here, my friend. Let's get the radio side going. Hello and welcome to the radio and podcast side of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We're going to get into a little bit of conspiracy theory tonight. Author, researcher John Koerner is here to talk about JFK and the weird strangeness around assassinations. We might even talk some UFOs and ghosts a little bit later on in the show. We are in roll call right now on our YouTube side, and we're pretty much caught up right now. I don't see anybody else fresh who's come in, but they will. They will. They always do. And then they're going to make me type out their names. You know, Vanessa, how are you tonight? Good to see you. Reminder to everybody, the super chat is open. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. And of course, you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Why? We do not have ugly swag, people. No ugly swag. Other people, they may have ugly swag. We don't. So make sure you go check it on out. spacedoutradio.com. Jerry Carter, how you doing? John Jackson, good to see you. It is that time of the night where I ask everybody to do me a favor. Hi, Kaz. Throw those horns up. Let's rock. Listening around the world. This, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a website for you. Rock out Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our show as well. You can follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travel Club. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. We got a great show of tinfoil coming at you tonight. John Koerner, author, researcher, paranormal investigator, talks about JFK and all things strange around the way some people have just become, what's that fancy term they use online now? Unalived, because we can't say dead anymore. Apparently dead is a dead word to social media. So we're going to use unalive tonight. I don't like it either. I know. Then in hour number 3, Swamp Dweller will kick things off. Robin Haynes will be here for the cryptid Q&A. That will get going right after that. So let's get right to it here. All right. John Koerner is a professional or professor of social sciences at SUNY Erie Community College in Buffalo, New York. He has previously appeared on America's Book of Secrets, William Shatner's Weird or What, as well as many other radio and podcast shows. He is the author of 8 books, including Why the CIA Killed JFK and Malcolm X, The Secret Drug Trade in Laos, and Exploding the Truth, the JFK Jr. Assassination. And this is what makes it fun, because to go down these rabbit holes sometimes makes life just a little bit more interesting. Let's bring him in. John Koerner, I think it's been about, 7, 8 years since we had you on the show. But I know you listen every night. I know you do.
Yeah.
How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Got a beard going, 5 days of growth. I think I'm looking good. Mothman behind me, so I'm ready to rock and roll, Dave. Here we go.
I'm just going to say right now, it is absolutely awesome that you literally grew this beard for the show.
Yeah, I know beards are big in the show. You have a great beard here too, so I want to just show the beard off, and a little scratchy, but it's looking good, I think.
Fight through it, my friend. You fight through it, and you're on cruise. You know, so as a professor, how do you go down the conspiracy realm like this? How did that happen for you?
Well, I think when I teach U.S. history, I'm teaching U.S. history for about 20 years now. And I always think, like with my book here, if the conspiracies are actually fact-based, I could teach about them, because Lincoln assassination, JFK assassination, look at what really happened there. The facts are there if you follow the evidence, and you can't get in trouble if you're using facts and you're not talking about like the earth is flat or something. So if we go with what actually happened on the daily events, then we teach about anything I want, really.
Do you enjoy going down the rabbit holes?
Yeah, I mean, with the book I have here with the four guns, I think what's unique about this one is with these conspiracies, like with Lincoln and with JFK, I look at like if they had survived in the second term, conspiracies would be proven because they'd be doing the investigations themselves. Like with RFK being the Attorney General, with JFK being president, he would have gone after those who were going to behind the assassination. Warren Commission would have been non-existent. I think he would have destroyed the agency and made it his life's mission to go into that second term with not the cover-ups that we're used to, but the conspiracies accepted by society as actual facts and evidence, because we all know who was behind the assassination. We can look at the evidence through my books that I've written, other researchers too, but look at assassination too. If he had a second term, he could also use that time to go after the conspirators to try to kill him too. So my point is that if you had these second terms, conspiracy might be a dirty word we have now today. They actually accepted by historians that knew what happened, because the research by the presidents and not the Warren Commission who made up facts.
I want to ask you about conspiracy theory for a second from a professional point of view. We as society seem to be very addicted to conspiracy. We don't trust, in the last 15 years or so, trust the mainstream media anymore. We feel that they have bamboozled us into trying to think or speak of different ways. I mean, and I'm saying that as a former media man myself of mainstream media. And the way I've seen it change, I think from what I went to broadcasting school for, journalism school, it's disgusting to see what journalism has become. And I watched it happen, and I got out while it was starting. I mean, but people in general are more inclined now to believe conspiracy than they are the mainstream media, no matter how truthful the media is being. Why do you think this all changed?
I think a lot of researchers have done evidence, fact-based research that has proven the existence of conspiracy facts. And if you go back, I think this all really goes back to how Lincoln assassination is taught, I think. Because usually you're taught it just was John Wilkes Booth that was behind the assassination, but he was with a group of conspirators that tried to kill Secretary of State Seward and Vice President Johnson, and he was linked to the Confederate government up to Jefferson Davis. So if we look at the very first assassination and teach it the right way, there was a conspiracy with evidence, fact-based approach that you can kind of use that going forward to see that other conspiracies happen, like with JFK or with Malcolm X or RFK. Because if you look at the way it's taught today in history textbooks, nothing is at all mentioned about those types of things. It's just one gunman, one approach, one crazy person does the assassination. But you look at more research, and of course, there's much more to the story than just that.
Well, a lot of people will say too that the conspiracy theorists seem to be the ones telling the truth after being shoved to the wayside as tinfoil hat wearing nut bars. People are starting to open up their eyes and realize that they had been played. I realized I could go down a lot of dangerous routes, but I mean, you take the UFO conspiracy. Look how that's taken off in the last, 7 years. It's been amazing to watch how all of this just seems to be playing out. And the conspiracy theorists seem to have it almost right.
One thing we can talk about maybe later on in the show, I have this for my paranormal walks. We do these walks in Buffalo, where one of the UFO reports we talk about is 1956, and two pilots saw a UFO crossing all of New York State, and at the time, less cover-ups about evidence on the front page of Buffalo News. And I think things change over time, where nowadays, there's more evidence and acceptance of the fact that these reports are for pilots. historians can look at these events as being not, from tinfoil hat people, but good people that know what they're talking about.
Do you think then that we're going to see within the next short period of time more conspiracy theories come true?
Yeah, I think two different things came out recently that were, I think, signs of hope. The Malcolm X case and the Robert Kennedy case. So 50 years ago, approximately, Malcolm X was assassinated in February of 1965. And his family, through the course of many years of pressuring the government and doing research, exonerated two men who were in jail for 50 years for this event. The assassination, was originally thought to be from the Nation of Islam, but now we know it was the agency did it, CIA did it, and the family is suing them for the covering up of the event and organizing the crime to kill him. And also with Robert Kennedy, you have Rhodes Hughes coming forward, Sirhan Sirhan, of course, talking about how he was brainwashed, and it takes sometimes 50 years to get these things out. But again, it's all about evidence, fact-based approach, and conspiracy theories are facts now based on the evidence, not just theories.
It's weird how the times have changed. I mean, just going back 10 years ago, a simple decade, and we would not be believing any of this. We would all think that this was all a drug-fueled misconception by people who had strayed away from society. And now look at everything, man. It's completely changed.
Yeah, it's hopeful for me too as a professor, because I feel like there's more of acceptance from his students to grow up in a different generation. That they're more willing to talk about these things in class, understand that if they look at the facts and evidence, there's not this stigma that they're going to be approached as being some kind of conspiracy nut. But if they can look at the evidence, the way I'm teaching it, and you can see the way things are taught today, there's more of this generation. I think they can accept these ideas as being more about facts and evidence, not just conspiracy theories like the Earth is flat or something like that.
Could you also add to the fact that there is no emotional connection? Like the generations that you're teaching right now, a lot of them now, I would say were born before 9/11 or after 9/11. Pardon me.
Yeah, after. Yeah.
They have no connection there. They'd have no connection to JFK. They have no connection to Vietnam or LBJ or George W. Bush or George Bush Jr. or whoever. They don't have those connections. They've never really seen hard times or scary times.
Yeah, like this is the Rooter film, for example. I've shown my class several times. They've never even seen that before. Like what it even is. So you have this whole generation then just understanding like who JFK was, his record on civil rights, and his approach towards ending the Vietnam War. And they never taught these different things by their mainstream textbooks because they're not from that generation, the 60s, where things were different and changing from my parents' generation. And my grandfather, of course, fought in World War II. And his generation was more trusting of the governments, and the idea of a conspiracy is perhaps different to them to understand. But this generation, I think, understands this is possible because they've seen these things in their lives. They've grown up with the idea of they can trust things, question things differently than their parents may have done or grandparents may have.
Do they believe it though?
Yeah, I mean, the way I approach this is that I like to talk about this in class using the evidence-based approach, like looking at different facts in the case, like the JFK or RFK or Malcolm X. And you can see like the way I wrote the book, for example, just basic things that don't add up with the official version of events. I say, yeah, that makes sense. I can see how you're using the like hypothesis, argumentation, and then you get the facts in that order, and then you can see how things make sense.
What is the typical question that a college student today would have on JFK, RFK, MLK, Malcolm X, whoever? What is the questions they are asking?
Well, a lot of things that they want to know about is like, why would our government want to kill these people? And I think if you look at historically how all four of them really were a threat to the Vietnam War, for example, continuing the drug trade in Laos and the president's policies towards peace in Vietnam, And you can see this kind of approach towards all of them that makes sense because they all were in some ways a similar threat to the authorities at the time who had the power and control. And I think it makes sense to them because they can see how that logically would be a motive from, the assassinations.
Mm-hmm. Are they just as curious?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about these time periods here is you have, with modern times, everything is like easily accessible. Very, everything's on your iPhone, everything's on your cell phone. But back in this time period, you have to dig in research. Not everything is available back then. So a lot of things was done by, newspaper reporters and people that spent years of research to understand what happened in these events. So if you could see like the breadth of evidence that's taken 50 years to come up with the evidence, you can see then why it makes sense that these would have happened that way. The motives for murder, how they went down on those tragic days.
And why do you believe, John?
Well, I think the 3 books I've written, I think going through the research and the evidence, it just, I think, makes sense to me because you can see things that just don't add up. And just one example, the J.D. Tippit murder, I think that one alone, in my book, I talk a lot about that. And J.D. Tippit, of course, was allegedly killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. This Oak Cliff, it's about 1:15 in the afternoon on November 22nd, 1963. And you have this as the origin story of why he was arrested that day. Arrested because he was allegedly he shot J.D. Tippit, this Dallas police officer. But you go back and look at the record here. Butch Burroughs, the ticket taker at the Texas Theater, he testifies many times. Oswald was at the theater. He got there between 1:03 and 1:07 p.m. They started the movie at that time, War is Hell, with Van Helflin. And he never left the theater until 1:45 p.m. when he got arrested. So Butch Burroughs, he says Oswald was there at the theater, got there 1:03, 1:07 p.m. And look at when Tip was shot. He was shot 1:15 p.m. And could have killed him because, of course, he was at the theater watching a movie. So that kind of approach, I think, fact, evidence, time, look at the time that kind of shows with these different things how Oswald, for example, that could have shot Tippit.
We're going to get more into the JFK assassination tonight because, that is some of the big news going on right now with the recent release of 80,000 more pages regarding this. But for you, looking at conspiracy theory, you mentioned an interesting word called or words, I should say, conspiracy fact. What makes the difference between a conspiracy theory and conspiracy fact?
Well, a conspiracy theory is like, the Earth is flat or that JFK Jr. is alive. That's a conspiracy. It's not even true, I guess. It's just a conspiracy nonsense, I guess. A conspiracy fact is like that JFK was, killed by, more than one gunman, you could say, because you can look at evidence of forensics of the case, or Lincoln killed by more than one gunman, because you have more than one person behind the conspiracy. Because you have the whole night was Lincoln was a focus of the conspiracy, but then you have Seward being attacked, Vice President being attacked. It wasn't just Booth being part of the conspiracy. So this whole approach, you look at the evidence, and it's more than one person being involved, and you can say, well, it's not. It's a fact, not a conspiracy. It's the truth. It really is.
Do you think that people are going to be a little bit more open going forward, knowing that, we're learning so much recently about conspiracies like UFOs, like JFK, and that everything that they thought was false is turning out to be true?
Yeah, I think as time goes on, like, for example, with the Malcolm X case and with the Robert F. Kennedy case, even with Dr. King as well, that took a long time with his assassination, where Coretta Scott King, Malcolm X's, Dr. King's wife, she spent decades researching the case with William Pepper and conducted her own research. And they conducted a mock trial in 1999 and found evidence that the FBI, Dallas Mafia, the Memphis Mafia was behind CIA, and two behind Dr. King's assassination. So you have with Dr. King, Malcolm X, Robert Kennedy. It takes time for the facts to come out, but once they finally do, people can accept that these are what actually happened and not just myths and theories.
Do you ever feel that you have been proven right to your fellow colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really. I'm kind of a lone voice. Not many of my colleagues talk about these different things. They do know that I'm, and them, the conspiracy professor and the paranormal professor, they might call me too. But I think I kind of embrace it, and I think it's a role that I like to play because look at most textbooks, you don't see anything about conspiracy theories in them, and I think if you have someone that can have the courage to talk about these different things and put them in textbooks and not deny the fact that these were actual events that happened and not cover them up, it'd be a big step forward to talking about the truth in our history textbooks, not just denying that they even happened.
Is the education system ready for that, though? If your fellow professors are not, how can it be? How can we move the ball forward?
I think just doing our best we can to have conversations like this, where one step at a time we kind of spread the truth that it's okay to talk about these different things, not be ashamed of the idea of being a conspiracy theorist. Because if you have the facts behind you, can present evidence that they actually happened, they can have the courage to talk about these different things and not be ashamed of being on the side of the truth and not, being forced to teach what's in the mainstream history text where it just says Oswald acted alone or Lincoln was shot by just a small group of conspirators and that was it.
So when it comes to the education system, if you were writing the education system, how would you change it to bring these new found revelations into the education system?
I think it starts with Lincoln assassination. You have to start from there and teach that was not just Booth in a conspiracy. There was links to the federal government all the way up to Jefferson Davis. Booth was probably an agent of the Confederate Secret Service or working for them. He tried to kidnap Lincoln at least twice that we know of with the support of their governments. So if we can talk about these different things, starting with that, and move forward from there and discuss the facts like Malcolm X's assassins were released from prison, exonerated. That's a fact. The fact that Leon Rose Hughes said there are two gunmen that shot Robert Kennedy, that's a fact. You're taught in history textbooks. If Hans Sirhan is saying he was brainwashed by the agency, that's a fact. So these things can be put into the record. Also, we can mention too, even our own government had said in 1979 that JFK was shot by two gunmen by House Assassinations Committee. That is never talked in history text ever. No book ever says it was ever mentioned. Our own government said in 1979 that he was shot by another gunman. So these things we talk, but they never are. There never any books. They just are forgotten. And they never talked about ever.
It's weird how the story just changes over the years, right?
I mean, everything just kind of gets picked on and choose. What you can pick on and choose, we wanted to teach, and then it just gets glossed over, and what the truth really is.
Do you think we're ever going to find a real truth?
Well, it's hard to say that because there's so many forces, I think, against that from happening that most of our curriculum is essentially kind of preordained by state governments, and we have to teach a certain curriculum then that's kind of it, especially in high schools. There's more freedom in colleges to teach kind of what you want, but every high school, you have to teach a specific set of facts to the text, to the test. And if you teach outside of it, you can be fired from your job. So you can't go any further than that.
John Koerner, our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. When we return, we're going to open up our own JFK files when we get back. What really happened? What's the information we need to know? This is Spaced Out Radio. All right, we are clear. Hey, Dirty, can you turn your mic on for a quick sec?
Hi, Dave.
I just need to quickly run upstairs and throw the little guy, remind him to take a shower because I got to take tomorrow. So be right back.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, I got this handled. Thanks for listening to Space Out Radio. I'm Dave Scott. I have a nice beard. How's everybody doing tonight? We'll have the Dave After Hours show with little Timmy James and Sasquatch Lady later on. Also, I'm telling everyone now I'm going to send Dirty Filth a large pizza. Yes, there's me covering Dave. Hey, John, check this out. My pal made me a Mothman as well.
Oh, nice. I love it. I like yours better than mine.
This was a special request.
That's great. Oh, man.
Yes. Normally, I'm just scribbling away in cartoons right now, but Dave's got to go. Well, he means he's going upstairs to make sure the little one's having a shower. He's taking him outside and he's hosing him down with the hose outside. He's just putting some dish soap on him and putting his thumb over the hose and
Nice.
That's probably not actually possible where he lives. It's probably still frozen up in the mountains. So
Very cool.
how's your night going so far?
Good. I've got one of my cats sleeping over here. Hope he doesn't wake up. So,
Just how many do you got? How many cats do you got?
2 cats, Jeffrey and Clark. One of them is locked up in the room, so he should be okay. Jeffrey's
Is it
over here
Clark?
sleeping. Yeah, Clark.
Yeah, I figured
and Jeffrey.
Clark would be locked up. It sounds like he'd be locked up. That name, Clark. Unbelievable. It's probably, I got my little gremlin over here on the side,
Nice.
and I got
Yeah.
Gargoyle and Whiskey and Ghost of Blob somewhere floating around.
Yeah, my one cat's sleeping over there, Jeffrey. Hopefully he doesn't wake up.
Is he orange?
Yeah, he's an orange calico.
Nice.
The crazy
And Jeff,
stuff.
yeah,
You can give him a
And,
snack for me after the show.
yeah, I gotta give him a sweat food for being a good boy. But yeah, Clark is locked up. See, he won't be bothered. He's a really wild Russian blue. Likes to eat everything.
That's like my Gargoyle's a Russian blue. Look at that, eh?
They're monsters. They have appetites
He is.
like a little
My
kid.
Gargoyle's. He's a little tiny guy, and all he does is beat up the orange boy. And
That's what he
he's
does
not very
too.
smart 'cause he's orange.
Jeffrey.
It's like, yeah,
They're bullies.
it's like he is, and the orange guy doesn't have a chance. Poor gremlin. We love you.
I have the
Gremlin.
same thing going on with my cats. Clark
He's
just
just universal.
destroys Jeffrey.
Sorry.
We have about 2 minutes here, guys.
Okay, I gotta get a tea refill, Dave. I'll be right back.
All
I'm
right.
gonna go to no swearing mode.
All right. John, I'm going to ask a quick favor here, if you don't mind. If you could just expand your answers a little bit, because you're a very fast talker.
Okay.
All right, go into depth, man.
Okay.
You're with the knowledge. You got all of this. I want to hear you take off and run with this ball, man.
Okay.
We've got about a minute here. It's good times. I'm so excited to have you back on.
Where we're gonna go next? What's the next topic?
JFK here.
Okay.
Now we'll start getting into it.
All right.
All right. Super Chat is open. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. And of course, you can shop at our spaced out radio store. We do not have ugly swag, people. No ugly swag, so make sure you check it on out, and we will get to it here momentarily. So we got about 15 seconds. And here we go. We're going to get into the JFK story here momentarily with John Koerner. But first, let me say hello to you. My name is Dave Scott. I'm the host of this great show. And we want to make sure that we remind all of you that if you missed portions of this show or others, you could check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. John Koerner, author, researcher, is with us. We're going to get into the JFK conspiracy because so many people are talking about this right now, John, with the release just a week ago of over 80,000 pages of new documentation that pretty much points the finger at what you've been saying all along, that the CIA is the one who offed Kennedy and many more. I mean, for a lot of Americans, that's a tough pill to swallow when your secret agency is the one doing things that only other governments were suspected of doing.
Yeah, let's look at the history here of why there was such tension between the agency and the presidents. It goes back to the Bay of Pigs invasion, when the president was tricked into trying to get rid of Castro, and he was not going to invade Cuba. So after this, he fires Alan Dulles, director of the agency, and Richard Bissell, director of operations. And then he goes on to the following summer, he shifts covert operations from the agency to the Department of Defense. And in response to this, the agency tried to destroy the Peace Corps of all things, and try to destroy because of so much tension between the two parts of the government, between the agency and the president. Even today, if you try to join the Peace Corps, you can't even do this if you're in the CIA. You just can't even, they're banned from becoming part of the agency because you're in the Peace Corps, can't even do it. But you go forward in time from that, there's also things like Operation Northwoods, for drawing from the Vietnam War, and just goes this whole approach between everything he does, tension between him and the agency, everywhere you go.
So let's go back to those days, because there's a lot of stories leading up to this, whether it was the CIA, whether it was the mob, whether it was Cuba, whether it was Russia, whether it was many hardcore Republicans in Texas who absolutely hated the man. I mean, there was a lot of people back then who actually wanted him gone. They wanted him out of the way.
Yeah, in Texas, you mentioned this specifically. There was, of course, the oil depletion allowance that the president was going to get rid of. This tax break for oil millionaires like Murchison and Bush and Johnson, making a killing off of oil, and he was going to get rid of that. That was a big motive for the assassination, to be behind killing him. The reason for it would be, I think that would be one of them. Also, you mentioned the files being released recently. You have Gary Underhill, who just was talking about this file being released. He was an agent of the CIA. He was found. In 1964 dead, gunshot wound to his head from his right hand. He was actually left-handed. So we have here that being released just a few days ago too. And you go even like with the agency, with the files being released, they're covered up in the 70s. George Bush covered this up, director of the agency in the 70s. So this will go back to all these different presidents were covering these things up for years, and no surprise it just took so long to release them. Took forever.
Do you think then that this had been planned for a long time regarding this?
Yeah, I mean, you look at how the cover-up happens. It starts, right away after the assassination takes place. The night of the assassination, the agency takes this Bruder film to the Hawkeye plant in Rochester and alters it in several different ways. Dino Brigliozzi, he talks about this, different researchers. He was in the room at the time. He was doing photographic work for the agency. And he said they did a number of different things to alter this Ruder film. One is that the headshot was made to look like it came from the front, and they kind of blacked out the back of the president's head. They took out the stoppers of the car, took out blood splatter, and they made it look like a whole different way, sequence of events that were never actually in the film itself. He also had the autopsy photos as well, and also agency was all around covering up these two different things. And I think right from there it begins with the cover up.
This was so elaborate, and so dangerous of a thing to do. Why do you think that this was, in the eyes of many who did it at the time, so-called necessary?
I think if you look at what's happening in 1963, JFK was going to get his second term. He was ahead of Barry Goldwater. Poll taken in 1963 in March. He was way ahead of him, 64%, like 30%. So he was going to get a second term. And that meant a lot of bad things if you were in the agency. The Vietnam War would be coming to an end. Drug trade in Laos would be coming to an end as well. Peace in Laos and Vietnam, there was not an interest of the agency. They tried to trick him into war with Cuba several different times. They wanted peace with the Russians, a joint moon landing with them. So he also, as I was saying, and the depletion allowance in the South. So the term for the president would not be, to their liking, of course. So this is the motive that they had, and I think that's why, of course, he needed to be killed.
Now, you believe that there is a purpose, well, not a purpose, that's a wrong phrase, that there is a connection between JFK, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and others that kind of goes along a long line. And we're going to get into that later on in the show. But what would be the purpose of trying to align and manipulate one of the greatest democracies ever created on this planet?
I think the agency kind of went off of its course at this point in time. President Truman made this point that he appointed men of honor to the agency when he created it. They had gone off course to do things against our own interests. And they should not have been doing these sort of things, covert operations, assassinations. He was ashamed of the agency. He thought that they should be dismantled when he was interviewed about this in 1964. So it does seem like that at this point, if JFK had a second term, it would have been, I think, changed, because he had been known who was trying to kill him. And you look at Robert Kennedy, he also looks at this too. On the day of the assassination, he goes to the director of the agency and says he thinks that they did this. He's going to prove it. So he spends the next 5 years, his own research, meets with two researchers and conspiracy theorists at the time, goes to Mexico City to see where Oswald visited to get to Cuba. And he comes to the conclusion that he probably was right, that the very first assumption that they tried to kill his brother.
Man, I couldn't imagine being a Kennedy at that time. I mean, you would think, what curse has come down on my family, to see that happen? Not once, but twice.
Even go back to JFK's older brother, Joseph Kennedy Jr., dies tragically in World War II in an airplane crash. So he was supposed to be, in fact, the one that was going to be the president. So he dies in the war. So you have even the first older brother, he dies in an airplane crash. You have JFK Jr., of course, dying. So you have this, this curse, as you say, doesn't stop really until everyone is affected by it in the entire family.
It's tough to think. It's tough to think about. It's tough to believe. It's tough to accept that, in a civilized nation, that this is actually going on. But the 60s were a difficult decade. We saw the rise of communism. We saw, the rise of a lot of dirty tricks being played, whether it was entering the Vietnam War through a false flag, or whether it was the JFK assassination, which he didn't want to send troops to Vietnam, but Lyndon Johnson did. How much was the military industrial complex involved in this?
I think that they had every interest to be involved with this, because you have here Operation Northwoods is worth examining for just a moment. This March of 1963, mentioned a false flag operation. You have here the idea would be to kill American citizens. You were going to look at the effect of this would have been to blame all this on Castro. They're going to blow up a passenger jet, start riots in Miami, blow up a warship in Havana Harbor, and blame it all on Castro to trick the public into going to war against Cuba. And all this planned by our friends in the good old CIA. And this shut down in March of '63 by the presidency. He's shocked by this, horrified they even want to do this. So we have here, although that last year in office, he approached ending the Vietnam War. He tried to get out of Laos as well. And he's consistently working against the agency, the tricks of, these dirty tricks in other war with Castro in Cuba.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely something that, was a trying time for a lot of people. And, it was the first time, I think, pardon my ignorance on American history, but it may have been one of the first times where you were worried about your neighbor. Was your neighbor a communist? Was your neighbor, spying for Russia? There was a lot of that going on too. Yeah,
it goes back to the 1950s and McCarthyism. In fact, Robert Kennedy was one of the your staffers for Mr. McCarthy, helped organize crime prosecutions in the 50s with his brother as senator. And he goes to go back to their time in the Congress in the 50s. And they were Cold Warriors. They came up with that. And it's interesting that they evolved on this. They became efforts to end the Cold War with a joint Russian moon landing, for example, outlined to the Russians, test ban treaties, peace in Vietnam. So the president evolves over time, and it makes him a threat to that complex that wants to keep promoting war. And mentioned the Bay of Pigs invasion. I didn't mention that was another reason that they kind of tricked him, tried to go into war with Cuba. Also, you mentioned the idea of the false flag operation for the Gulf of Tonkin incident that got us into Vietnam, where that never happened. They weren't even attacked in Gulf of Tonkin to start the Vietnam War. So all this stuff happens, and it just pushes the nation further into Vietnam until it just can't be stopped.
Have you had a chance to go over many of the pages that were just released in the JFK files?
Yeah, the main thing about Gary Underhill, I thought it was interesting. This man who was saying that a small clique in the agency was behind the assassination. He dies mysteriously with a gunshot wound to his head. He was, I think they said he's right-handed when he was shot in the left side of his head in 1964. And he felt that, from his perspective and research, that the agency, his own agent, had killed the presidents. And it looks like most of the what's in there is probably collated, and a lot of it was redacted. And it's been, over the course of time, you can see how it's been covered up. He had Obama administration releasing portions of it, Biden released some portions of it, and now the rest of it, mostly we think, is released within the past few weeks.
What was the biggest surprise to you that was released?
I think that one thing that we need to understand is that the files are going to be incomplete, because they're not going to release anything they're going to be embarrassed by. If you look at the names that Howard Hunt would have probably wanted us to look at for information, they're not even going to be there. David Morales, David Lee Atwood, Cord Meyer, men he named in the conspiracy to kill the presidents, they're not even going to be in there. So the agency would never put these things on paper anyway. They never would implicate themselves in this in the first place. So they're not that stupid. So I think what would be in there, though, would be names of agents that would be in operation for other different things they may have done. They're embarrassing to them. But I think the most thing to think about, though, is what's been left out that could never be written in the first place, I think.
Right. I mean, I think, one of the big things for me was in the notes that were recently brought forward is we still don't have a clear, concise killer. We don't. I mean, by the sounds of it, we know the CIA allegedly committed the crime. We know that they believe there was a second shooter that helped place the kill shot. We know that apparently Lee Harvey Oswald did fire one of the guns, allegedly, and we still don't know a lot of the true fact behind this. Are they hiding information, or do we want to believe that there is more to this than what actually happened?
I think that if you look at what the agency would have been doing at the time, they were probably covering up their tracks, because if they had the names of the assassins, if we knew them at the time who they were, I think if JFK had survived the assassination, we would have known who they were, and they'd been prosecuted. And I think if you look at the way this could have gone down, RFK would have been the Attorney General, and he would have spent the next 4 years finding out the truth about who these people were. And we would never have been this place in the first place, because we get to the point where they've been proven who was in the conspiracy to kill his brother. But I think in retrospect, looking back like at the Warren Commission, I think we're going to look at this as who was there at the time, who did the research that can go back and prove that, there was another gunman, another shooter. And local people, researchers, reporters, Dallas police officers even talked about this. They saw another gunman. People there at Dealey Plaza, they all saw another gunman shooting from the front. So we have here with people that were there, they're talked to. They're the ones we can point to for evidence, not the government.
Who do you think was the second shooter?
Well, I think the best theory that we have is French assassins hired by the CIA, and they probably were 2 teams of gunmen, maybe even 3. We know that there was a Mauser found in the book depository by 2 Dallas police officers, high-powered rifle. 1:22 p.m. Weissman and Hirsch found this rifle there, so it's possible that was the weapon that killed the president. We also know that from the front we have witnesses that saw someone shooting, and even in hospital we have headshot, back of the head, exit wound. So we have evidence from the crime scene that there was other shots coming from the front. Oswald was probably not even there to even do the shooting, so that is also something we can get into too.
What about the driver of JFK's limousine?
Well, if you see the Zapruder film, it was originally recorded. Zapruder took this film. He's standing on in front of the grassy knoll, takes this film, home movie camera, has the whole assassination on film. And the witnesses, they had seen the car come to a complete stop during the headshot. That's taken out of the movie. You actually can see them moving forward at the time. So I think that the reaction time was abysmal. They should have been more willing to react quicker. The night before, they were at the Jack Ruby's nightclub till 4 o'clock in the morning drinking. So they were not able to react quickly enough to stop the shooting.
So you don't think that the limousine driver was involved in the kill shot? Because the latest film that's been cleared up that I saw on X the other day, it looks really suspicious, because he turns and looks at it. You can see his hand kind of turning backwards.
One thing that could maybe point to that, if this is actually true, if you look at the exit wound in the back of the president's head, it does seem like, if you look at the angle of it, if he is shooting from here, it would come out over here, and that might line up with the forensics of the case. And you look at that, the way it would work, that could make some sense in terms of the exit wound back of his head, because it does seem like it was on this side of the head and not that side. So that could be why we're talking about that. That may be what's happening there.
Whoever did it had to be a pretty darn good shot. And the reason why I say that is hitting a stationary target is hard enough, but hitting a moving target, that's very difficult. And the fact that, JFK was not, or pardon me, Jackie Kennedy was not injured in any way, and others in the car were not injured in any way, it seems very, very accurate, shall we say.
Yeah, and the Koerner was an accurate weapon. It was defective with its scope. It was a low velocity rifle. It was not easy to shoot with it. The Mauser was actually a much better weapon to kill someone with. The Koerner was a junk weapon. The FBI couldn't test it successfully. They could not repeat Oswald's performance. And in fact, you can see in the Zapruder film, first shot would have gone through a tree, which makes completely no sense. And you can also see from the reports to the hospital that his throat had an entry wound right here in the back of his throat. He was shot from the front, exit wound in the back of his throat. So you've got here from the Koerner, not a good weapon to shoot someone with. Like you're saying, it's a difficult shot to begin with, much less with a junk weapon like the Koerner would be.
Do you think that those names and the suspects will ever be released?
Well, you look at what E. Howard Hunt said when he had this deathbed confession to his son, St. John, just before he died about 20 years ago. He said that the agency was conspiring to do this based on the president's policies in Laos and Vietnam. And he named David Morales and Cord Meyer as the two that were behind the conspiracy. Now, Cord Meyer is interesting because his wife was JFK's mistress, and she dies a year after the assassination in mysterious circumstances in D.C. So we have here with Cord Meyer and David Morales, I think those two are names you can point to that would be part of the conspiracy to kill the president.
Did you think they expected it to be such a chain reaction?
In what sense? How do you mean?
Chain reaction to a number of other, unreasonable, life-ending procedures, let's say.
Like with Malcolm X and Dr. King, Robert Kennedy. Yeah, yes. I think you look at the way the trend line between all of them is the Vietnam War. You have even early on with Malcolm X, he talks about the war being a useless war that is against people that are people that don't need to be killed. They're people just like African American people. They're just targeted because of this useless war that they should be not involved with. He talks about the white man's poison killing people too. Drug trade in Laos is affecting inner cities of our country at the time. So he's talking to the agency. And you have mentioned two men exonerated after 50 years, released from prison. Never were the assassins, Malcolm X. Now he's now being depounded as a victim of the agency in 1965. So you see this with the presidents, with Malcolm X. It's the same kind of approach. Kill a man who's a threat to them, and close the book on JFK and Malcolm X.
On that note, we got about 30 seconds to go here before we go to break here at the top of the hour. John, just your overall thoughts with everything. Very ugly, shouldn't have happened, should have happened, or had to happen. Just your overall thoughts. 15-second answer.
I think it's disgusting. Our own agency could kill our own presidents. How can we get to this point where we can accept this as not even talk about this as being true? So let's try to embrace the truth now and just stop the lies. It's enough.
I love that. When we return with John Koerner in hour 2, we're going to get into RFK, MLK, even JFK Jr. Spaced Out Radio. Out Radio with host Dave Scott. All right, we are clear. John, we're going to turn it over to Dirty Filth and Gremlin here.
Okay.
Who's critiquing the art. All right, Dirty, all yours. Gremlin's
It's all me.
this.
I know. He wants a super mega burger. Ow. Always sharp all over the place. Oh, it's blistering ball sack. Unbelievable. All right, here we go. Here's Carl, the gray alien, hanging out with Sasquatch at the local pub here, and they're checking out the super mega burger, aka the Gutbuster. It has two mammoth patties. Sorry, go ahead.
It alien meat, or is it Sasquatch meat?
Oh, it's mammoth patties. They went all the way up to Siberia to grab some actual mammoth, and then they cooked it up.
Oh, okay.
So it's two mammoth patties, garlic pickles, onions, lettuce, and Swiss cheese.
I wonder what gray burger would taste like gray meat.
I'm not sure. Apparently, they say that they're mostly synthetic and they're not completely real, but I don't know, man. You know, they say that they don't have nipples, but I always make sure my gray aliens always have nipples. So. Constantly, it's cold, right? So flying through space. I guess they probably have heaters on spaceships. I've never been on a spaceship, so I don't know. But I actually drew this cartoon the other night, and I was like, you know, I just scribbled it I was eating some half-price chicken wings at the local watering hole and scribbled some cartoons and junk, and I was like, you know what, this will be a good one. And then Tim, there he is, Tim Mothman and his beard. It's apparently two separate entities. He's like, I want that drawing. I'm like, I'll make you up a good one. So I'll scan this out here and send it off to him, and we get a package in the mail, and there'll probably be some scribbles and cartoons in there too as well.
Nice.
Anyways, I'm rambling. I had to tell everybody, if you live in Edmonton or the Edmonton area, not Edmonton, Kentucky, or Edmonton in the UK, Edmonton in Canada, July 11th to the 13th is the White Avenue Art Walk in Edmonton. I will be there with my These cats are just absolutely out of control. With the custodian of mine, and we'll be selling artwork plus plushies, because we're currently working on making stuffed animals out of my gray aliens, or is that stuffed aliens? I'm not sure. Nonetheless, Carl, Stanton, and Alan will be turned into plushies in no time, and they'll be for sale. One of a kind. There'll never be any other of them made ever again. That's how she does her plushed animals. She currently makes zombunnies, which are here actually. It was the Mothman that. There we go. She made the Mothman earlier, my friend Fox Vegas.
Oh, there he is.
That's the Mothman right there. Beauty. Custom made. Only one ever. Sorry, it's a little bit bright. I can't adjust my stuff on the fly.
It's like a moth baby.
Yeah, it's fuzzy too. And then here's. I purchased two of these things. I just thought they were fascinating. And so she does. These are the zombunnies.
Oh yeah.
So this is
nice.
You can't see it because the damn thing is. Anyways, it says Calloway. The name is Calloway. He's the Phenom, and it's actually based off the Undertaker from wrestling. And,
very cool.
So I can have my gray aliens turned into these suckers. Sorry for all the squeaking chair and everything, and my rusty old arm that I got here. There we are. Back to the cartoon. But yeah, so if you're near Edmonton, July 11th to 13th, come down to the White Avenue Art Walk. This is a plug. Come visit me, and you can scoop up some of my drawings as well. It's all originals at the Art Walk, and there's also other great artists there. But I'm not going to plug them because good for them.
Yeah, yours is better.
And
yeah.
anything that doesn't sell, it'll be available through me, and we'll create a whole bunch of these things. Yes. Anyways, rambling away. It's almost cat snack time. I wonder if Dave probably left his boy outside. He's probably half frozen. Now he's just hosing down the shower to keep him warm. That's how Canadians wash their children down. They go outside, like I said, with thumb over the hose. Psh, right, Dave?
Always, my man.
Okay. I don't think I swore this time, Dave, but you might have to go back and double check it.
I don't think you swore. I didn't catch any. Yeah.
During tootin'.
You're good.
All right, gentlemen, you have a great night. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Dirty
right.
Phil, thank you very much. You're the best. A big thank you tonight to Blue Cruise and T-Bone for the super chats. Greatly appreciate it. Hi, Christine Lynn. How are you? Who else snuck in here during the break? Let's see here. Scrolling on down. I think we are caught up. All right. We got about 20 seconds, John.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. We are coming back here in 5 seconds. Here we go. Here we go with hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Talking about conspiracy theories around JFK and others here on the show. Him momentarily, but first we want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network, our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. You can follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Let's see if we can find it here for you. It is Breedbait. Breedbait is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Let's go to author, researcher, John Koerner. We're looking into the JFK assassination, what really happened, what's going on with RFK, MLK, Malcolm X, JFK Jr. Are they all tied together? We're about to find out. John, welcome back to the show.
Good to see everybody. Hi, Dave. How's it going?
Good. Now, we're focusing a lot on JFK because of the history of it all and the recent history with the latest notes being released. And we're hoping that more come out about other people who have been taken out by allegedly the CIA and other government agencies. Let's go over to RFK. What was the purpose of this?
I think, look at RFK, how much of a threat he would have been to everything. They wanted to keep going in 1968. He spends 5 years. He goes right to the agency director at the time and tells him, I think you did this. You killed my brother that very afternoon, November 22nd, 1963. He spends the next 5 years doing his own research, and he comes to the conclusion that they killed his brother. And he wanted to open up the new investigation when he became the president, 1968 or 69, would have been actually 1969. And also, at the very same time he's doing this, he is openly criticizing the Vietnam War that's going on. In the Vietnam War, new investigation into the assassination. And I think that makes him a dual threat to them, and that's why they had to kill him. And look at what happens here at the crime scene. There is new evidence that has come forward that it was not just Sirhan that was shooting at RFK that night. Nina Rhodes Hughes, RFK's campaign staff manager, she has said that she saw another gunman there that night that shot at RFK. And Sirhan never got close enough to do the kill shot in the back of his head. He was too far away to do that. He actually was he was much further in, about 10 feet away from him. So the kill shot came right over here behind his ear. And Nina Rhodes Hughes saw this at the time, but she thought she'd be killed for talking about this. So she's never said anything about this for 50 years. And also we know that Paul Schrade, his campaign manager, also saw another gunman there that night. And he came forward 2 years ago to talk about this as well. So we know now officially from these two people who were there that there was not just one gunman, but two. And hands for hand, he's admitted now he was actually brainwashed by the agency to kill our Kennedy. So we know all these different things now that they were behind the shooting.
The purpose of taking out JFK,
Robert Kennedy, yeah.
was why?
I think if he became president, he would open up a new investigation into his brother's assassination. And he would have then exposed the truth of the Warren Commission being, a fiction. And he would have held, trials for treason, probably for those who killed his brother, and then the Vietnam War. And those two things would have been like a death knell to the agency. They had been not around for very long at the time. It had just been created in Truman's administration in the 1940s and 50s was when they originated. So this is when they came into power. But now they were this covert operations team doing assassinations. So if this came out that they were doing things like killing the president and trying to kill Robert Kennedy, I think it would have been gone by 1970 or so. So they would have been, footnote in history by then. So that's why they had to be taken out.
Big thank you to Grant in our Roger Grant in our chat room, who says, coincidence, today is actually Jack Ruby's birthday. He would be 114 years old today if he had survived.
14 years old. Yeah, if he only had not died of cancer mysteriously, he would have been still around today, right?
Born in 1911. That's just incredible. Incredible. But weird coincidence right there. But the idea that there has never really been a lot of talk that there was allegedly potentially two shooters on the RFK side of things. Why have we never heard that?
I think, like with Nina Rhodes Hughes, she even admitted that, like the witnesses for the JFK assassination, they died mysteriously. So she didn't want to be one of the victims that just ends up with a gun to her head, like it had happened before, like Gary Underhill. We mentioned him. He dies a gunshot wound to his left side of his head. He was right-handed. So she even told the FBI that she heard more than one shooter. She heard 12 shots, and they covered this up. And the report said that she heard 8 shots. So she even said the truth even back then, 68, but they cover things up. So it takes courage to bring these things forward. Paul Schrader mentioned him too. And it just takes time to just have the courage to talk about these things because they're such bets of their lives if they talk about the truth.
Did the RFK one sting as much as the JFK one? Because JFK was president, it was expected that Robert Kennedy was going to run for president as well. Do you think that this was, which one hurt more, I should say?
I think the RFK in some ways hurt more because it's like this 1-2 punch where you've got the president, of course, dying, and then you've got Malcolm X, I guess, that happens as well. Dr. King assassinated in April. So these 4 things happen within just a few years of each other. He's your last hope for civil rights, for Vietnam War ending. And he would have been, I think, the last chance to have a new policy of end the Vietnam War, truth about the assassinations for him and perhaps Dr. King as well. So we have here with Robert Kennedy, he was like this hope for a new era that we could probably say of healing that would have been possible because there's so much death in the 60s and destruction. And he would have been, I think, this symbol of a time of change that could have been possible if he became president.
Do you think the CIA allegedly or anybody else found it necessary that both had to be done?
I think if you look at going back to what was said by Howard Hunt, he said that the key link between both assassinations for who did this was David Morales. He was at both events, planning both of them. He actually bragged that he killed both of these bastards. He said, especially that he was proud of killing Robert Kennedy. So I think you can see here hatred that they had for both of these men, what they had done back in the Bay of Pigs, and betrayed that they felt their weak on communism, tried to kill off the Peace Corps. I mentioned that before. So this is an agency that just was diabolical, with hatred of the Kennedys. And they tried to trick him in the war in Vietnam and Laos, Cuba. And there was just everything that they could do to make sure that they would be eliminated. And I think Hunt was mentioning that Cord Meyer too was, when JFK was, his wife was his mistress. That was also part of why he wanted to kill him as well. And I think the personal reasons play into this too, with Cord Meyer as well.
And this came right after Robert Kennedy had delivered a victory speech at the Ambassador Hotel for his win in the California Democratic primary. I mean, walking through a kitchen to have this happen out of security of having to be there. I mean, that's just taking it to a whole different level, is it not?
Yeah, because you have where this was happening, they were walking to a press conference where all the cameras were already in one spot. So it was a perfect place to do this because no photography could be taken where they were in the kitchen pantry. So that's what they did, right in that particular spot. It was picked for that reason. Chaos all around, no cameras that they could use. Photographers were in another room waiting for RFK to arrive. So it was chosen for that reason why they did it right there. And the way it was set up, so Sirhan is on this far end of the kitchen pantry. RFK is over here. And he is never close enough to do the kill shot behind his head, which was done, as we talked about, witnessed by Neil Rhodes Hughes and Paul Schrade. But we also want to mention here, we talked about the California primary. He won this primary. And that night, he gets a phone call from Mayor Dealey from Chicago, where the convention is going to be. He tells RFK that the delegation of Illinois is behind him. They're going to vote for him. And he has the whole delegation behind him for the nomination. So he has that sewn up, Illinois delegation. He also has New York State to vote the following month, his home state. He won that one too. So he's going to get the nomination. He won California. So that was a big night for him. And he would have been, of course, at least a nominee, but not when they were in 68 over Nixon. So this was the moment that they had to take him out. They couldn't go any further with this. That had to be it.
The idea that he wanted out of Vietnam, just like his brother never wanted to go to Vietnam, what did that play into this, you think?
I think that when he started to talk about this openly, it made him a target because he was saying in his opening speech, when he declared for the presidency, that he wanted to end the Vietnam War. It was March of 1968, gets in the race a bit late. He's already have to go against Gene McCarthy, won the New Hampshire primary, so he's got some catching up to do. But he does mention that he wants to do what he can just because he feels obligated to do this. The country is falling apart. He feels he just needs to do what he can to end the Vietnam War and just new policies that his brother tried to implement and never could get accomplished.
Do you think then that, I mean, we can't change history. Let me rephrase it. What do you think would have happened if that didn't happen?
I think if you play this forward in time a little bit here. So I think that if he gets elected president in 1968, then you have in 1969 and 1970, the war comes to an end. There's no Kent State shootings. Cambodia never invaded by Nixon, obviously. You got with Russians, joint moon landing that his brother wanted. He wanted Russians, Americans went on together to end the space race. He also opened an investigation into the assassination of his brother. And I think that would have culminated with trials for treason for the agency. And that would have proven to who, from his perspective, killed his brother. And I think that would have taken a few years, but it would have been probably done by about 1972, 1973.
Do you think he knew who did it?
Yeah, I think, again, this all starts the day of the assassination because he goes to the director of the agency and he tells him that this must have been you that did this. It looks like a covert operation. He knew all these different things that they did, like Operation Mockingbird, the different things that to assassinate Cuban President Fidel Castro. They can do. He was part of the planning for these different things. So this looked like to him a black op. And he went in the next 5 years doing his own research. With assassination researchers, with Mexico City, Roswell visited to get to Cuba. And he come to the conclusion that he had killed his brother. And he was going to use the presidency to open up the new look into the murder and prove this to the American people. And that was why he was going to be president in the Vietnam War. This is what he was going to do with his first term in office.
Scary times. And how does Martin Luther King play into this?
Well, you look at Dr. King and the way he also comes out against the Vietnam War. It's April of 1967, 1 year before he's shot. He talks about this openly. The Vietnam War is immoral. It's killing more people that were black than white. He felt that was not fair. This war was wasting American resources and money. It should be spent to help poverty in our country. And he becomes a target because of that, I think. Now, when you look at the way that this assassination sort of went down, the way it was planned, there were two teams of shooters that were organized to shoot Dr. King. And this all came out in a trial in 1999. It was on HBO, live on TV. And Dr. Pepper, Dr. King's lawyer, held a trial for alleged assassin James Earl Ray. And the trial acquitted Ray of the charge of being the assassin for Dr. King. Instead, they implicated the agency in the shooting, and also the Dallas Mafia and Memphis Mafia in the assassination plot to kill Dr. King, and not James Earl Ray. So this came out. Scott King was behind the research behind this, Dr. King's wife, and this came out in this mock trial that took place with Judge Brown was the judge in place to do the investigating with the research team, and he came to the same conclusion that James Earl Ray was not the shooter that killed Dr. King.
Now, for record, the King assassination happened 2 months prior to Robert Kennedy being taken out, and we know that Dr. King was not or didn't have a lot of support from groups like the FBI and the CIA. They considered him a radical. They considered him someone who was making people rise up and speak against the government policy, government decisions, and so on and so forth. Never mind the racial inequality at the time, but there was a lot more to it than just that. He was really considered an enemy of the state, was he not?
Maybe two examples of this. So you got, at the end of his life, he starts a Poor People's Campaign. Makes him a bigger threat to powers that be, because this is not just for black people, it's going to be everyone that needs help. White people, indigenous people, women, men who need help. A larger campaign that could really change society, in a way that never had really been done before. Also, in his earlier life in the 1960s, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover sent a letter to Dr. King. They said he should kill himself because he found out that he was having an affair with one of his mistresses. He released this to the public unless he killed himself. So Dr. King was always threatened to be killed by the threats from the FBI or governments. And this, I think, got to him, and he kept going on anyway. He didn't really want to do anything but keep the efforts going towards peace in Vietnam and the Poor People's Campaign, even though J. Edgar Hoover said he should kill himself and exposing the truth of his mistress and his infidelities. But he didn't care about it. He just wanted to keep going, do what he could to just help the country.
Who was James Earl Ray to Dr. King?
So James Earl Ray was the alleged assassin for the King assassination. He was an ex-con, a patsy like Oswald, and never could have been the shooter. The place, the shooting would have taken place in this boarding house. Would have been possible shots. Would have been through a window and through some trees. So this was, I think, the way they set it up for him to be a patsy. It was perfect because he was a racist ex-con, so it made sense he'd have a motive to do this. But just like with Oswald, you can't place him at the crime scene to do the shooting. You're just going to match the weapon that it was with the shooter. It was different weapon that matched a different gunman, different shooter for both assassinations.
Now, the aftermath of Dr. King sent America into a frenzy. Riots all over the place, protests. Even fellow politicians and mayors of cities were telling basically the federal government to tell the police to stand down and don't cause a bigger ruckus than what has already been caused by the loss of this incredible life of Dr. King. And I've never seen that before. Being a foreigner as well, it's something that we don't get taught up here in Canadian history, obviously, about MLK. We know about him because we watch a lot of American television up here. But the power and the connection that Dr. King had with everybody, it didn't matter your race, your creed, your religion. He was just a man of the people. And, the way I look at him is that, if you were to portray a hero of what a person should be, it would be Dr. King, and I just think that, in not having a great understanding of the power of this man and the power of his conviction about the way humanity should live, I mean, this would go against the grain, causing these radicals within the alphabet agencies to want to do something about it, because you control the people, you control the masses.
Yeah, I mean, we have with Dr. King, he is such a threat to all those different people that could, talk the Vietnam War, for example, ending. And like with his life story, it's just amazing what he had to overcome at such a young age. Threats to his life. He died 39 years old, Nobel Peace Prize winner. And he just consistently wants to live another day to do what he can for his country and just fight for, what's good for the nation, even though he has such death threats against him of every single day of his life. Even nowadays, Dr. King's holiday is not even celebrated by many states of our country. They still even recognize him as a national holiday. In some southern states, they still don't even like him. So he's still controversial in our country even this very day. It's very sad that has to be, but there's still racism in our nation, kind of shown by that disrespect for his holiday not being recognized by some southern states.
The 60s were an ugly time for the United States. And then it leads us into Malcolm X here as well, because, that was the big four of the decade. Malcolm X being, taken out as well. Was there, as we got about 30 seconds to go, was there a tie between the three previous assassinations and Malcolm X as well?
Malcolm X actually said that he was being talked about by the agency. They tried to kill him once in Africa, once in France, poisoned him, in Africa, and they probably bombed his house at least once. So he knew that they're the ones behind that. He was talking about the Vietnam War and it's the drug trade in Laos. So he became a target, just like Dr. King, just like JFK. And we did mention before that two men who were in prison for 50 years just are exonerated because they're not the assassins. And in fact, Dr. Malcolm.
Hold that. Malcolm X. Then we return with John Koerner, Spaced Out Radio.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
Let's look up these names.
All right, we are clear.
Okay.
All right. Good show so far.
Yeah, a lot of good information. Let's see.
We'll get to some audience questions next. Good times so far, people. Good times. I wonder if the YouTube algorithms will like this one. I always wonder.
Let's hope so.
Oh, you never know these days. It changes so frequently.
I found the two men, Muhammad Aziz and Khalil Islam, the two men who were exonerated from Malcolm X's assassination. 83 years old. Had to wait 50 years. A long time to be in prison for a crime never committed.
Right? I'm getting a true history lesson here tonight.
we're trying our best. I think it's going well. A lot to go through.
All right, we got about 2 minutes here, bud.
Okay. So what are we going to talk about next?
We'll finish up with Malcolm X. We'll touch quickly on Junior, and then we'll get to some audience questions.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds good. JFK Jr. Gotta pull that back from the memory belt. That was a while ago.
All right. Thank you tonight to Big Dog and Fast Hemi, Pam, Mel WD40, Blue Cruise, and T-Bone for the amazing super chats. Greatly appreciate the great love and support, guys. Thank you very much. If you're new here tuning in, do us a favor. Hit subscribe, ring that bell. We greatly appreciate it. About 18 seconds here. All right, we're already through one half of Spaced Out Radio. Here comes the second half. My name is Dave Scott. On the top of the hour, John Koerner is our guest, talking about the assassination in the 1960s and much more. We'll get to some audience questions coming up here momentarily. But first, we want to remind all of you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. All right, John Koerner is here, author, researcher, paranormal tour guide. We're here talking about the assassination of Malcolm X. And Malcolm X, I want to just bring this up. You know, he seems to get, and I don't mean this to be rude, so please don't take it this way, but this is just from a Canadian up north trying to figure all this out. But to me, he seems like almost the one that's forgotten in the 1960s because of the size of the names of JFK, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. Why do you think that is? Or maybe it's my imagination.
No, I think you're right, because he was controversial. I mean, he was part of the Black Power movement. He was, I think, misunderstood, but he goes through an evolution in his life story about how he evolves into be a person that can be accepting of other ideas. He talks about working with Dr. King, for example, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So we have here with Dr. King, he's more about nonviolence, but Malcolm X is more about confrontation. And I think that makes him more controversial, but none less important, though. But Malcolm X's life story is one of evolution. He starts off his life as a criminal, a drug dealer. There's a prison, and evolves into a later of spiritualism and Muhammad Ali, also part of Black Power movement as well. Same thing with Malcolm X. So they become a symbol of this power of Black is powerful, Black is beautiful. They become more confrontational. I think it makes them more controversial.
Let's move over to JFK Jr. because history shows that he crashed his plane at Martha's Vineyard, I believe, due to an airplane accident. But you think there was something a little bit more sinister to this?
Yeah, I mean, look at the evidence of that one, too. This is July 16th, 1999. And the official version of events is he is suffering from what we call spatial disorientation. But the night was very clear. We know this because weather reports are looked at the time. We also know that on the ground, 3 witnesses saw an explosion. And we also know that there's wide, I guess you could say, blast zone. They're recovering luggage, suitcase parts, sneakers, body parts all around the island. If it was just a crash in the one spot, it would be kind of one area, but that was not the case. 14-mile blast radius. We also have, at the time of the event, he takes off at 8:13 p.m. from New Jersey, and he calls in to Martha's Vineyard at 9:13 p.m. to tell air traffic control he's going to land, drop off his sister-in-law. And if anything was wrong with him or the plane, he would have said something at that point in time. If anything was wrong with him or the plane, he would have said something like right at 9:13, 1 hour into the flight. So the plane was fine. He was fine. 1 minute later, 9:14 p.m., we have on the ground witnesses see a flash of light, an explosion, and not anything other than that can be, I think, concluded that it was some kind of, who knows, bomb on the plane, surface air missile. What it was not, though, was his fault.
Now, there were two other people on plane, his wife, and I believe, was it her sister or friend?
Yeah, Lauren Bissett. So he had Carolyn and Lauren Bissett, his sister-in-law, who were on the plane with him.
So
he was on the way, to you mentioned he was on the way to Roy Kennedy's wedding. They had a weekend. They were taking off in New Jersey, dropping her off Martha's Vineyard. He was going to head up from there to the wedding that weekend for his Robert Kennedy's youngest daughter, Roy Kennedy.
now there was some speculation at that time too that he was thinking of a presidential run.
Yes, in fact, we know this because he was selling his magazine George that very spring. That was indicating to everyone that he was done with this, and his next move was to run for president or governor of New York or senator from New York, one of these different things, and to get into the presidency. He said this to his wife. He told it to her. I think what ended happening here was his mother died in the 1990s. It freed him up to run for president because he didn't want to do this and get killed, and it would break her heart, I think. So when she passed away a few years before, that allowed him to kind of take the next step to being free of to run for president or governor first or senator. I think that was allowed him to do this.
Why has very few people looked into the investigation of whether or not something else besides a plane crash took him out?
I think because it's too convenient just to look at the official version of events and dig deeper. But if you look at what happened there, there's more to the story than just that. I mean, one thing I can mention too, like at 2:15 in the morning, ABC News reports that they have heard Pepper Saratoga's rescue beacon, and it makes sense that they probably would hear it then because it was in the water, and the Coast Guard is closing in on it, and the Navy too. And they say, well, hang on a second, it's not Pepper Saratoga rescue beacon. It's actually a down aircraft from the Navy issuing a rescue beacon, not Pepper Saratoga. So was it two planes in the water? Did they crash? How can they confuse these different signals when one was like a foghorn, one's like a repeating sound, like a higher pitched sound, not the same signal? So we have that being unusual too. And I think just you look at the evidence of the case, do some research, and find out it was not his fault. Witnesses on the ground, they saw explosions. Weather was clear that night. Called in an hour into the flight. This was not his fault.
Do you think it was accidental and a cover-up, or do you think this was on purpose?
I think what's possible here is that there's a cover-up because it's possible that there's an accident here that was embarrassing to people, maybe, or a bomb on the plane perhaps put on there. But you look at the way this official version of events was kind of given to the public. He was a bad pilot. Not true. He knew what he was doing. Always checked his plane. He was meticulous. He had instrument training. He actually took that flight several different times at night before. He knew what he was doing. He actually passed his instrument test with a hood on. So I think that you look at what happened here, it was not an accident. It was deliberate.
Why take him out?
I think it was becoming clear that if he run for president and being involved in politics, this could be a threat to anyone who would want to take him on in the country. He would be the kind of person that could kind of bring the country together, a unique figure in the Democratic Party, was in the kind of rise above politics. One thing I want to mention too that I did talk about in my book, Exploring the Truth. He also was interested in the JFK assassination, exposing the truth of his father's death. He looked into this very early on in his life, in the 1970s. The Warren Commission was complete fiction, and he wanted to use, I think, the platform of the presidency to bring out an investigation into his father's death. So they also make him into a threat too. I think that also was probably why maybe he was taken out as well.
Just one of those things that they didn't want it to come out, so they figured they had to keep the conspiracy going.
Yeah, I think if you look at even his first girlfriend talked about how he was obsessed with this as a kid, looking at research about the assassination and his own looking into the murder and having his own conclusions about who killed his father. And he felt that it would have been his obligation to expose the truth of what would happen there. And I think that made him a target. And he decided to sell George magazine. The signal there was that he was shifting from being a safe magazine editor to becoming either a governor or senator or president. So that could be, I think, a threat to those who want to keep the truth covered up, for who killed his uncle, perhaps, and killed his father too.
All right, you ready for some audience questions?
Let's do it.
All right, let's get it going here. If you ever want to ask questions, all you got to do is join us on our YouTube chat or on our social media. Start off with John Jackson here. Do you think that Booth still was killed, that John Wilkes Booth was killed in the barn?
And look at this. Some of the evidence behind this is interesting because doctors looked at John Wilkes Booth's body. They said that he had, the corpse had red hair. Booth did not have red hair. It also does seem like that David Harold, who was with Booth at the barn, he also said that wasn't Booth that was taken out of the barn. And it's possible that he could have escaped because you can see the escape route that was planned. It was planned ahead of time to get him out of Washington and safely into Virginia. So the different hair color, the doctor is looking at the body saying it's not him, and David Harold saying that's also not Booth, I think could be indications that he may have escaped from the barn. You also can see there's a story of a person that survived and lived in Oklahoma by the name of John St. Helen, claimed that he was Booth that lived into the 19-teens. And he had the same facial features, same scar on his face. So that could have been him living in hiding those years later.
All right, let's go over to In the Studio. Hi, John. I am a former student of ECC South and City. I knew John Harrigan. My question is, what was Jack Ruby's deal? Why was he anything else than a nightclub owner?
Well, you have here with Ruby, I want to just mention here that we should point out the thing about him that really makes this whole assassination conspiracy upsetting is what he plays the night before the assassination. Because you have here that night, the entire Secret Service is at his nightclub, the Carousel Club, there until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, Clinton Hill. And all this was covered up and exposed by Abraham Bolden, the black agent JFK appointed to take him to Secret Service. He exposes this later on in the book he writes. Abraham Bolden was facing discrimination because he was black, wrongly accused of corruption, pardoned by President Biden 3 years ago. So Ruby, his role here, I think, was to make it possible agents to have slow reaction times, to make sure that they did not get to bed on time, they were drunk and unreactive the day before the assassination in the early morning hours. So I think that is what he played there, very key to make their action times very slow. And by the way, thanks for being a former student. Shout out to my guys and gals in ACC. So thanks for listening, everybody out there.
Paramarv is asking, I saw a documentary claiming LBJ had knowledge of the event to come in Dallas. What's your thoughts on this?
And then before we have the so-called planning party in Wilkinson's house north of Dallas, Clinton Wilkinson was an oil merchant. Mentioned before that JFK is going to take away their oil depletion allowance. There's tax credit they wanted to get for making oil cheaper for them in Texas. Wilkinson was there. Johnson was there. Nixon was there too. Hoover was also there. And Johnson leaves the party and tells his mistress that these damn Kennedys are not going to embarrass me anymore. That he tells right to his mistress that he knows they're going to be killed in the morning. JFK is going to be dead by the morning, and this comes out years later when she writes a book about this. It's called Morning in Dallas, or Texas might be the name of the book. But you have for the night before with this planning session from LBJ. He's there. And we should mention, too, that the day before the assassination, this is like number 19th or 20th day, at least for Dallas. He tells his secretary, Evelyn Lincoln, that he's going to drop JFK, he's going to drop Johnson from the ticket and put in place instead the governor of North Carolina instead in his place for 1964. So he's going to get rid of Johnson for 1964 with the governor of North Carolina.
Let's go back to Paramarv here for a second. Any thoughts on Judith Very Baker's story about being Oswald's girlfriend? Also, she claims he was an asset that was trying to prevent the Dallas event.
Yeah, he said that he was one less shooter that could be there if he kept involved with the plot. That's why he tried to stay in it. So we look at Oswald on the day of the assassination. We can very definitely clear him of being involved because the paraffin test was taken, which showed that he never fired a gun that day. Tests showed negative results for his cheeks and his hands. We also know he never shot Tippit. We mentioned it before that he was not at the Tippit murder scene. He was actually in the theater watching a movie, but gets there between 1:03 and 1:07 p.m. But he does seem like he knew about the plot to kill the presidents, but did nothing to stop it, certainly. It was instead the patsy that they convicted public executed by Jack Ruby.
Let's go to Jeffrey. Any thoughts on the Billy Soul Estes tape discovered by Estes's grandson and played on the Alex Jones show? Estes says Lyndon Johnson should have never ordered Mac Wallace to kill JFK.
They never should have ordered him?
Yeah.
Okay. So Mac Wallace is interesting because his thumbprint shows up in, of all places, the Texas Theater, the Texas School Depository building on the 6th floor where Oswald allegedly was shooting. Mac Wallace was LBJ's, henchman, and this fingerprint was a latent print that they tested, and it matched the print that was on the record of him because he committed another crime previously for Johnson, killed someone before, and that print was proven to be a match for Mac Wallace and was found in the 6th floor of the Texas book depository where Oswald was allegedly shooting from. So we could tie Johnson to it because of Mac Wallace's fingerprint that was found there that day of the assassination.
So in other words, what you're saying is LBJ has a lot of blood on his hands.
Yeah, I mean, he was going to be, there was allegations he had taken bribes for Texas oil contracts illegally. He's going to be prosecuted for this in the next term, dropped from the ticket for another running mate for North Carolina. So he was going to be out. Hoover was going to be out too. Hoover, Johnson were going to be yesterday's news if there was no term for JFK. And I think we have here with Mac Wallace, his fingerprint being found at the crime scene. You could probably tie LBJ right to him through that.
Let's go to another question. We got about 5 minutes to go. We got 2 questions. Big Dog is asking, after so many years, why does JFK, MLK, or anyone else matter after all this time?
I think because conspiracy theories, we're all told that, they're just a bunch of nonsense. But if we had these assassinations and they survived the assassinations, the truth was told from the very beginning, we have known that conspiracy theories are real and these happen. Facts back up the evidence. And if we had found out from the very beginning, if you had second term, Malcolm X was able to survive, Dr. King, they could have proven who tried to kill them and live out their lives into their later times, and they could have also helped us heal our country. So our nation would be much different, much better if they had survived So that's why it's important to talk about them, because our nation could have been so much different and better if they had not been taken from us in the 1960s.
And one more question here from Derek. What would be the aftermath if, say, the current sitting president got unalived?
I think obviously there would be a lot of questions about who would be behind it. He survived 2 attempts on his life. I guess it was during the campaign, came very close. So it does seem like, thankfully, the current Secret Service is much better at protecting the president. They have much better protocols than they did for JFK or with Ronald Reagan. So it does seem like, thankfully, the presidents now are better protected from being attacked from conspiracies or anybody else.
All right. 3 minutes to go. You also take part in a paranormal ghost walk. Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, for the past 10 or so years, I do these ghost walks in Buffalo area. I do walks in Lockport, Hamburg, and Buffalo. And, they're narrative stories based on my research and books, and they're a lot of fun. We do, investigative reports on the walks. I kind of publish some of these things in my books, and maybe take photographs on the walks too, and just tell some ghostly stories and have a good time with it.
What kind of ghosts do you have?
Well, if you go to my website, paranormalwalks.com, I've got a special section. It's marked Spaced Out Radio. You can see 2 photographs of some ghosts and UFO report we talked about on the walks. So you can kind of check that out tonight when we go to my website. You can see these cool pictures that I put up for everyone to kind of check out for my website.
What do you love about the paranormal?
I think the unexpected part of it is interesting because you have just the idea that anything is possible with this world. UFO reports, psychic events, ghost stories. And I think all this encompasses things that I'm interested in these walks. I think encompass all these different things in my ghost walks in Buffalo.
It's also a great way to teach people the history, isn't it?
Yeah, because we have with the walks, it's not just the stories. You have the history of what happened in the buildings, the suicides, the events of battlefield events, Iroquois Confederacy. So you often have behind it legends and tales that back up with the evidence of behind what happens in the places that they're haunted, or the legends and tales really happened in burial grounds or military victories and battles, things like that happen in the area.
What's one of the famous battles that happened there?
Well, you have, when in the Buffalo area, you've got the War of 1812. Right across the river, that river, you have Fort Niagara gets burned down, Fort George, a lot of deaths and destruction from the War of 1812. Buffalo gets burned down, a lot of ghost stories from that too. So, whole Niagara frontier, a lot of deaths from just the War of 1812, certainly.
Good times. Good times. I want to say a big thank you for coming back on Spaced Out Radio. It's been a lot of fun having you here once again. And do us a favor, take 30 seconds, tell everybody where they can find your information and your work.
Well, you go to paranormalwalks.com. This is my website for my ghost walks. And Paranormal Walks has got those cool pictures of the ghostly images and stuff. My book's on there too. Amazon has my books too, Paranormal Walks, and let's see, Barnes and Noble has them as well. And that's kind of the usual suspects. You can find out the stuff I'm doing.
Love it. Big thank you for coming back on Spaced Out Radio, John. You're great as always, and thank you for being a great listener of Spaced Out Radios as well. We really appreciate it. Coming up next in hour 3, Swamp Dweller will kick things off, and Robin Haynes will join us for the cryptid Q&A, so make sure you get your questions ready for Robin if you're in one of our chat rooms on social media.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
Great show, John. Thank you very much.
I think it went pretty good, Dave.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks for having me on, and
Anytime.
we went over a lot of good stuff.
Of course. Of course. Brother, you take care. We'll see you in the chat room again.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
You guys have a good night. Have a good third hour.
Absolutely. John Koerner, everybody. Thanks, John, as we say goodnight to him. And I will be right back. All right. Morning, Major Lee. I'm bringing Robin in. Hi, Robin. How are you?
Good.
Good to see you tonight.
Yeah, you too.
R2D2, how are you? And I think we are caught up there. We're caught up. How you been?
Good. How are you?
Good. Good. Mhm. All right. Oh, here. Swamp Dweller is about 5 minutes long. And so just so you're sitting tight. Big thank you tonight to Big Dog ×2, Blue Cruise, Mel WD40, Fast Hemi, Pam, and T-Bone for the great super chats. Hi, Earth Goat Trees. How you doing? Yes, check out the fan zone on our website, spacedoutradio.com. Got a great bunch of pictures there for you to check out. So make sure you do. Here we go with the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. We're going to get into Swamp Dweller, Cryptic, and Robin Haynes. Next, my name is Dave Scott. Thank you for joining us as we bring us in for some wonderful, wonderful radio tonight. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Breed bait. Breed bait is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Let's head to the swamp.
Hello and welcome to Spaced Out Radio's Swamp. I'm Swamp Dweller, and tonight I'm going to take you on a mystic journey of the unknown, sharing tales of monsters, legends, and nightmares. Welcome to the Spaced Out Radio Swamp. Camping and hiking in the backcountry has always been my passion since I was old enough to go out on my own and travel to different locations. I've been fortunate enough in my life to be able to go to some of the most remote and beautiful places in the United States. Needless to say, I've seen some pretty strange things, and at times I've been downright terrified of the encounters I've had out in the bush. I've always believed in the supernatural and the unexplained. Having grown up in an extremely haunted house which sat on an old Native American reservation. But that's a story for another time. With all that being said, I still can't begin to explain what happened to me and one of my closest friends in the mountains of Arizona one night. After a long week of work, my friend John and I decided we would go to a well-known mountain range just north of Phoenix to hit up some of the off-road Jeep trails and spend the weekend camping at one of my favorite spots. For obvious reasons, I won't disclose the exact location, but if you live in the area, you probably know exactly where I'm talking about. After a few hours of driving across the rough terrain, we finally arrived at the trailhead. We parked our Jeeps and gathered our gear and began our half-an-hour hike to the campsite. The trailhead is not well known or heavily used at all. I've gone to the spot for years, and hell, sometimes I still drive right past it if I'm not looking hard enough. After a while of hiking, we finally reached the campsite. Now, this place is absolutely beautiful. It's right on the edge of the mountain overlooking the Salt River, and usually, there's not another soul for miles. I've made countless solo trips here and I've always felt at ease, even after a close encounter with a mountain lion coming inside of my camp. But this time, I don't know, something was definitely off, and I could tell that John felt it too because he was a lot more tense than usual and seemed to be on high alert. We tried to brush it off and ignore it as best as we could, and got our campsite set up. After a few beers and sitting around a small fire later that night, we started to relax just a bit. It was starting to get late, so I decided I was going to call it a night. Just as I started to stand up, a rock the size of a baseball comes hurling out of the wood and nails a tree right beside my feet. What the heck? I stood there stunned for a second before reaching for my rifle. John jumped up and pulled out his pistol. "Hey, if there's someone out there, you better make yourself known right now," I yelled as I and John started walking in the direction that rock came from. We got no reply. No sound of footsteps, not even a slight breeze. It was dead silent. So much that my ears were ringing. After a few minutes of investigating the area and finding absolutely nothing, we returned back to the fire and decided it best to stay up and be alert for a little longer in case something else happens. About an hour goes by and John and I are starting to calm down and are just sitting around talking. All of a sudden, a large tree branch flies out of the trees and lands on John's tent, ripping a massive hole in the roof. We jumped up and both aim our guns in the direction that the branch flew in from. We fire a few rounds. Maybe this was not a good idea, but we did it anyway. We hear something massive tearing through the trees. At first, we thought it was running away from us, but we realized it was running a circle around us. We shined our lights in all directions, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever or whoever this was messing with us. At this point, we were both shaken up and started gathering what we could to stuff in our packs and get the heck out of there. John grabs my arm and says, "Stop. Do you hear that?" He started looking back towards the edge of the mountain. At first, I didn't hear anything, but after a second, I could make out a low hum. It was a very low, but high-pitched whistle that was vibrating the ground slightly, but it was coming from about 50 feet past the edge of the mountain. Like, there was no possible way anyone or anything could be out there, unless it could fly. I started walking towards the sound slowly, scanning the tree line around me. As we slowly moved towards the edge, I lift up my light and shine it towards the unexplained sound. As I did, rocks and large sticks and even parts of a cactus flew in from off the edge, bombarding us. It was like shrapnel. We ran the full 30-minute hike in about 10 to 15 minutes to our jeeps and threw the few things we managed to grab in the back and just hauled absolute ass out of there. We never went back to the tents, and I haven't been camping in that place ever since. I've heard a lot of scary stories about that area ranging from Bigfoot to UFOs and even skinwalkers. But after those events, I still have no idea what terrorized us that night. I don't plan on going back to find out. But if you live in the area and know kind of where I'm talking about, if you are unlucky enough to stumble upon an abandoned campsite at the edge of a mountain, do yourself a favor. Turn around and go the other way.
Thank you to Swamp Dweller for another great story. If you want more just like that, head on over to his YouTube channel, Swamp Dweller, hit subscribe, and ring that bell. He's there all the time. Free stories, thousands of them for you to listen to if you want to get creeped out any time of the day. It's time for Robin. Robin Haynes, it's always good to have you back on Spaced Out Radio. How are you this week?
I'm good. I always like being here. I look forward to it every week.
Me too. Me too. You just make it so fun. You really do.
Aw, you guys are like awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's because we're drawn that way, that's for sure. I want to go over a couple things with you in regards to cryptid encounters.
Okay.
They happen as often as we publicize it. It is extremely rare to actually have a sighting, have communication. You're a little bit different because you're intuitively connected to them. But on average, are we seeing as many cryptids out there as the social media platforms make it sound like?
We're actually seeing more. Believe it or not, there's more. And the bad thing about it is, you know, even in any type of tabloid or anything, the bad stuff sells better than the good. So you get all these stories of people that are terrified or bad things happen. We don't hear enough about the good stuff. We really don't. I think it's important that we know about the dangers because not all of them are good, just like all of our people aren't good. But I think we don't get enough of the things that are good that goes on and the positive encounters. There has to be that balance, and there doesn't seem to be. I do know that people that are habituating with these things are very hesitant to come forward. You know, we tend to get very protective of our clans. I know myself personally, there's literally nothing I wouldn't do for mine. And I work with several different clans at the current time. And that includes some dogmen as well as a cat person. And people that have them living around them and are working with them and habituating with them, they don't want to come forward. You know, it's a lot of danger. Like when I lived back in Michigan, nobody was allowed at my home. I had 4 people, as far as researchers that I trusted, Igor Borsteff being one of them, that was allowed to come to my home because I didn't trust anybody. I couldn't trust anybody because people that don't understand that these are a human hybrid, they wanted to hurt them. It was a big deal. Let's bag a Bigfoot. And so people tend to be very closed mouthed about the positive encounters. But the bad encounters run like wildfire because people are scared, and understandably so. But those are the ones that make the headlines. Now, behind the scenes, like with my business, I get contacted constantly. 7 days a week I work. And I am constantly contacted with people that are having those positive encounters, or people that may have been out in the woods and had a small sighting or felt their presence or heard them walking around or had any kind of an encounter at all. Excuse me. And they want to know more about them. They want to know how to get the positive encounters. You get the positive encounters because of your heart, the frequency that you are, the respect that you show, and how you are around them. And a lot of the bad encounters are not anybody's fault. It's you may be in the wrong area. They may be in the wrong area, you know, and there are bad ones. I always make sure people know that there are bad ones out there. They are not all good any more than our people are. But we just don't hear about the positive encounters as much. You go on podcasts and you listen to these shows, and I firmly believe that people are being honest. But the people that have these good encounters, that are working with them on a regular basis, like myself, they don't come forward very often. Like we really, and I'm sure the audience, for the people that are encountering them, that have those positive ones, we are protective. Like we are definitely like parents when it comes to these guys, and we are protective. And so you don't hear as many of those, but there are actually more encounters going on now than there ever has been before, in my opinion.
The idea that, you know, the clans are different and that you're very protective. I've noticed over time that I have become the same. Like when I have people around my community ask me about where the Bigfoot are, where do I have my encounters? I just point in a direction and say that way, about 15 miles or 30 miles or whatever. I'm not giving them the location. And
No.
it's not that I don't mind giving the location. I just don't trust them, you know? And what I mean by that is I just don't want the area to get screwed up. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? You know, people all of a sudden coming in there, trying to chase them down, trying to maybe, you know, use
Mm-hmm.
point sticks and ammunition on them. Okay. I mean, there's a lot that goes on with it. And it's not easy to build a communication with them. Like
Correct.
like me, you're different, obviously, but for someone like me, it's difficult to build that communication. And we've been going to the one area. This will be year number 3 coming up in the one area. And I don't want to say there's trust there, but I do want to say that there is recognition there, if that makes sense.
It does. And I also think like when I like mine spoke with the ones that, you encounter through there, they are comfortable with the fact that you're going to come and go there. And there is a basis of trust there. And there is a basis of knowing your intent because they've been around you before. When, like, even at my home when my kids were young, my kids were hesitant to bring people to my house, not only because they didn't want to be mocked, but they got protective of them too. We become protected of them. And the thing of it is when we don't, we can have a clan that, like the clan that I had there and the ones here I have no issue with. But they would freely walk around my yard and my property all hours of the day and night uncloaked. It wasn't a problem for them. They felt safe there. But if I were to bring somebody that I could not trust there, and they left my property and they accidentally let it slip that they were there, it could be anybody that came back. Or not only that, but the other flip of that coin is, how will the Sasquatch react with strangers? These are a highly frequency-based being. So every time a new person comes in, there's a new frequency. And if it's a low frequency, they're not comfortable with that. It bothers them. If it's a high frequency, they want to know, why is there another high frequency being there? And you don't know how they're going to react to the newer people. I had probably 4 researchers that I felt they were safe with. I did have one person that came out with one of these researchers, and I simply said, I don't mind that you're here. You're welcome to be here. I don't want you in the woods by yourself. They don't know you. They knew my family. They knew the people that I allowed there, which was very few. And I said, you're a guest from, somebody that I had brought. I think Igor Borsteff brought him. And he's like, okay, no problem. I'm in the house making dinner for everybody, and I'm getting mind speak, and the Sasquatch are panicked because this fool went out in the woods without anybody else. They didn't know who he was. They had kids out there. So you're setting them up for what could potentially be a bad situation with a group that really is as kind as they can be. And I went out there and I got him and I said, listen, I've asked you not to be out here without going with me so that I can make sure that they know you're safe. We would traditionally, when new people would come out, I would go up and I would hug them. And I'd say, see, look, I'm fine. I'm not hurt. They're nice. They're kind. And that way they would feel more comfortable. But I would never allow people that they did not know to just freely roam my property. Now, Igor did. He was there on and off all the time. He would come and spend 3 or 4 months at a time. Bob Daigle was another one. They absolutely loved him. Joe Stewart came to my house. We had some very nice people, but we were very cautious. I had a woman from our church that came by. I was going to babysit her baby, and she pulled me aside the second she got in the house, and she said, this huge thing just ran across your driveway. And I'm like, okay, great. Now I have to let her know. Which I did. And she was wonderful about it. She stayed quiet, never had any problems. But we had, and I've talked about this before, my furnace broke down and I had to have a repairman out there. And they literally, when he left, they were pelting the truck with rocks. He was not allowed there. They didn't know him. And I was there by myself with the kids, and they're very protective as well. But this is where it can sometimes go a little bit awry. Like, your group is very comfortable with you there. You've been working with them now for 3 years. It takes time. And sometimes when you bring a lot of people or a lot of strangers, especially a lot of people at one time, because there's so many frequencies going on, it's like a sensory overload for them. I always tell people, don't be out there by yourself. I mean, I've done that on and off for years, but it's really not the best thing to do. But when you bring a group in at one time, it is literally a sensory overload. And you can take a group that is very kind and compassionate, and where they won't be dangerous, they can be a little bit scary.
It's funny, though, how different clans can act, because when we look at the other clan that I deal with, the one that has chased us out of the area twice, they seem a lot more aggressive. They seem a lot more, how can we put it? A lot more intimidating.
Yeah, uncivilized. Yeah, we have to remember, we sometimes forget these are as diverse as we are. It's like you may have a neighbor on each side of you, and one is very kind. The other one is just enough to make you go insane. They all have different personalities. They all have different likes and dislikes. They'll all tolerate different things, and the areas that they're in will have a lot to do with it. If you have some that are in an area where there's burial mounds there, Indian burial mounds, or their grave sites, they are going to be highly protective, and they will run people off of them. If it's just a regular area where they're going in hunting, they might be a little bit more protective over that. If it's just an area that they're comfortable being in, they may be more relaxed. And then we also tend to forget that while there are some aggressive ones, we also have some that will run us out of an area if they think that there is a danger in that area to us. I mean, they've literally not run me out of areas before, but have told me to go back to the house. It's not safe. They would take care of the issue, but I was to go back to the house, which I always did. So it's not as cut and dry as a lot of people think. There's a lot of circumstances that can change things. But again, these are all very diverse in personality, as in attitude, looks, color, everything. They are just as diverse as we are.
I know, though, but I mean, it's funny because at the one spot, I have no fear.
Right?
At the other spot, I don't know what the hell is coming.
Yeah.
It's very intimidating, and I just find that very difficult to deal with, and I know others do as well.
Yeah, there are. And, I work with a lot of people, and the first thing that I teach them in my classes when I'm working with them is get out of your head, get into your energy, because energies don't lie. You can walk into an area, feel the energy, and automatically know if that's a place that you should be in or not on that particular day. Where if you go in being logical and all in your head, you miss what your body's telling you, because your body reads the energy, and there's a disconnect between when it reads the energy and to when it goes into your brain. So there's that lag time. Your body is going to instantaneously read that energy and go through your consciousness as to whether or not that is a day you should be there. And so one of the things we work with first when we're learning how to raise our frequency and use the energies is to rely on that. Energy signatures do not lie. Other things may, energy signatures don't. So you can tell within, just like you said, you go in there sometimes and you don't know what's going on. Your body is reading that energy. And I guarantee you it read it before it got to your brain. And there's nothing wrong with going to an area, picking up that maybe that's not the best day for you, and saying, okay, I came here planning to spend the afternoon. Clearly, this isn't my time. Come back at a later date. Come back at another day. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, just because you're there doesn't mean you have to stand your ground and say, well, I've already driven this time. I'm staying here no matter what, because you're asking for trouble.
And on that, Robin, I'm going to get you to hold on right there, because we are going to go to our final break of the night. Robin Haynes with the Cryptid Q&A coming up here in the next half hour.
This is Spaced Out Radio, and your host, Dave Scott.
All right. We are clear. Good start. Good start.
Good. Yeah, I'm really surprised that right now there's so many things going on our planet that people aren't aware of. Like right now, we are getting more encounters with cryptids and the ETs, more of the good ETs now, I think, than the bad. Not that some of the bad ones aren't still around, but we are really in a time of change. And the frequencies, as high as they are, and are going to continue to get higher and higher, are bringing more of it out. And people are becoming more awakened to the fact that these things are there. And the amount of calls I get in a week is really, it's just incredible. I feel really blessed because most of these people are just as sweet can be. And they're like, I feel like there's this urgency that I know about them that I never felt before. And these frequencies are triggering it, and they want to know about it. They want to know how to get that communication in a way that's relatively safe and positive. But it's just amazing to me, the encounters that we're having right now, and with the aliens as well. There are a lot of aliens here right now that have come on this planet for a lot of events that are going to be happening. And everybody will find out as they go. But most of them are positive encounters. I mean, there's bad encounters, of course. The cosmic balance is good and bad. You can't have one without the other. But right now, this huge shift in contact is major. I mean, and I think it'll be for the best, but it is major. And people are having to become more aware. And these cryptids are actually for the people that are going into that higher frequency and are getting out of that 3D frequency range, are really getting the contact. They really are. Even if they're not seeing visual sightings every single day, they're getting some form of contact, whether it's mind speak or, whistles and calls in the woods, but there's always something. And people are starting to come around. It's going to take a while, but they're getting there.
That's good. That's good. We got about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, it's good to start hearing people talk about the good experiences. The scary stuff is what sells. And that seems to be what draws the crowd. And I think people need to be aware of the bad stuff. You can't protect yourself if you don't know about it. But I also think it's important that some of the better things come out as well. So people, the whole reason I started doing the shows was because the Sasquatch wanted me to. They wanted me to make sure people knew the truth. They're not monsters. They're not Nephilim. They're not all bad. They will admit they have some that are bad. They don't even hesitate to admit it. But we also have to take accountability and say we have bad people too.
Oh, very true. Very true. If you have questions for Robin tonight, make sure you put them in capital letters, and I will get them to her.
Definitely an amazing time right now for us, I think.
All right. 1 minute, Robin.
Okay.
All right. Big thank you tonight to CS, Big Dog ×2, Mel WD40, Pam, Fast Hemi, Blue Cruise, and T-Bone. Greatly appreciate the love. Thank you. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. and go from there. And here we go. Seven seconds. Here comes the final half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. We always appreciate you tuning us in wherever you are on this great planet. Here in a second, but first we want to remind everybody that if you missed portions of this show or others, you can always check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Talking Bigfoot here. Yeah, it's always good when we get to it. Let's get to some audience questions. Start off with T-Bone here. Is it an amazing time right now, Robin, because more people every day are becoming more aware?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, too, as I said before, we're going through a frequency shift, and it's going to actually get much more in depth, but we've already started the process. And because all of these cryptids and the ETs are high frequency beings, it just brings us closer to them. It helps us understand them more. And they become more aware of us, just like we're becoming more aware of them. But I think, certainly in my lifetime, I think that there's more now of contact and communication with all of these things now than I've ever seen it.
Let's go to CS. At what age did you realize that most people can't talk to animals, or at least haven't?
I never, when I was little, I never thought that not everybody could do it. And I think I was probably 6 or 7, and I was talking to my parents, and I'm like, well, the dog said this, and the dog said that. And that was the first thing, and I would always talk to the cryptids when I was little. I mean, I would mind speak with them, and I would go to my parents. I can remember at age 4 asking them about it. My parents just kind of looked at me like they didn't know what to think. They believed me, but they didn't know what to think about it. So I was very young when I first found out about it. And as I got older, it was a big shock to me. It really was, because I just thought it was what everybody did.
All right, while we wait for a few more questions to come from the audience, I do want to ask you in regards to certain areas. So let's take the spooky area that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A few days ago, I was kind of meditating on the area, and all of a sudden I started feeling from the area Dogman energy.
Mm-hmm.
It scared me.
Yeah. People tend to get really afraid of the Dogmen. They're so drastically different than a Sasquatch. Their whole energy is different. Their vibe is different. They're much more stoic. We automatically think that if it's a Dogman, we're in big trouble. And there is a lot of different kinds, whether or not they were government created, alien created, whether they were born from our earth, whatever. There's so many different kinds, and they are much more stoic. They are much more stern. I've met a few of them with a sense of humor, but they really don't have a sense of humor like the Sasquatch does, and it makes it a much more intense energy. And they're like the police of the woods to begin with, but then at the same time, they can be tough. The ones I have around me are very well behaved, but I certainly don't act around them as I do the Sasquatch. I give them more space, a wider girth.
It's kind of funny, though, because in this vision that I was sitting behind my vehicle, and I have a Jeep that I drive into the forest. And we have cameras facing forward, and that's where it walked through. Quietly, like I didn't even hear it, like I didn't even know until check the cameras after. Now, this is all in meditation state,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of freaked me out.
Well, even in a meditative state, they
So-
will, if they want connection with you and they want you to know they're there, just like they will in dream state, they will put themselves into your mind so that you have a visual. Like, hey, here I am. Just so you know, here I am. So, I mean, as far as it being a vision, I think it probably was a very true vision. And they were making sure that you had that in your mind so that you knew they were there. For whatever their purpose was, they wanted you to know they were there. Because if they didn't, you wouldn't have it.
It's still part of the fear factor of getting into this. You
Mm-hmm.
really do have to be prepared for anything, don't you?
Absolutely. And we also can't rule out the fact that our traditional cryptids, like Dogmen, Sasquatch, cat people, goatman, those are the ones that normally come to mind. We are leaving out a whole nother group because there are so many cryptids out there that most people have not seen yet, do not know exist. The Sasquatch will tell you that they have what they call the Micaiah, which means thee that walks the earth but has no name. And these are cryptids that we really don't know what they are or why. They're just there and there's no name for them. So we go out there and we're trying to wrap our heads around the fact that there's a Sasquatch and a Dogman. And at the same time, those are really the least of the fears. And they're not all that they're bad. It's just they exist. We're playing catch up. We're trying to be in a frame of mind where we can accept the Dogmen and the Sasquatch and some of the other ones that we're aware of. But the ones that we are not aware of are even more frightening. And it's not because they're doing anything. It's just because we had no idea they existed to begin with.
How do we know if it's just imagination or an actual vision?
I think to me, like when I get visions, because I'm psychic and I get the premonitions and I get the visions, they feel altogether different. When I'm just getting a dream or whatever, it's more chaotic. It's not that it makes more, it doesn't make sense because, we get cover dreams that a lot of the ETs will give us where they don't want us to have a memory of an encounter and they will make all these crazy dreams that are very chaotic in your brain. But there is a feeling that's different. Energetically, you feel that it's different and you have this deep-seated feeling that you may have got it in meditation. You may have got it just like walking through the woods and all of a sudden it comes into your mind, but it feels more real. And we have to remember too that a form of mind speak can be a vision in your mind. It can be like a movie. It can be like a picture. And that is a form of mind speak. It's like with you, the Dogman, I feel sincerely, they wanted you to know they were there. For whatever reason, it wanted you to know that. And that's why you were given what you were given. When you go into a meditative state, it's easy for everything to have contact with you and to talk to you, to appear to you. And that's a very real thing. Just like with dream state is every bit as real as when you're awake. It's just a different plane. That's all the difference is. And so you've got all of these things that part of mind speak. Again, it's not just voices in your head. There's a huge list of ways you can get mind speak. And some of that is a vision, an image, or a picture in your mind.
Let's go to Paramarv. Robin, I'm heading up to Traverse City soon. So could you put in a good word for me with the forest people up there? If I slather myself up with peanut butter, would I have a better chance of meeting one?
First off, yay for going to Traverse City. My family's in Traverse City. I love Traverse City. It's phenomenal. I don't think you need to put peanut butter on yourself because my guess would be the black bears would be the first thing there. But there are a lot of good ones up there, which you have to be careful with when you get up in that area. Grayling is a hit or miss area when you get up in that neck of the woods. There are some really nasty groups in Grayling. Now, I have encountered some decent ones, but there are a couple that can be a little bit off hinge. So you just have to kind of, again, feel those energies when you go out there. I will definitely put in a good word for you. Okay. Like I used to live in the Manistee National Forest, which goes all the way from where I lived at all the way up towards Traverse City, almost to Traverse City. I've encountered a lot of them going back and forth through there. I will say the dogmen that I encountered in the Manistee National Forest were lovely. Absolutely lovely. Sasquatch were just the most incredible things there. I tend to notice more of the crabby ones on the other side of the bridge after you cross the Mackinac Bridge. But like there are pockets that will have some crabby ones. Not anything that I think is going to come out and try to kill you or anything like that, but are just, they're crabbier. They just like to be left alone because it's such a vast amount of woods. They literally can just get up there and disappear, and they like it that way. Primarily the ones I encountered up there were fine. Go in with a pure heart. Remember that even if you're not understanding how to get mind speak, they get it very well. It's not a two-way street. So in your mind, as you're going into these woods, you're telling them, I'm here with a pure heart, so that they know they're going to read your intent anyway. But when you speak the words and it matches your intent, it pulls weight with them. Let them know, I'm not here to hurt you. I would love interaction if you come with a pure heart. If you are good, if you are kind, then I want interaction. So you're not giving leeway to the bad ones to just show up.
What about the Gugwe? Are they everywhere? Well, first off, before we get into it, let's explain what a Gugwe is to people.
The Gugwe are a whole different being. They're going to look like the body of a Sasquatch, but you're going to notice a very pronounced snout, almost like a baboon. Now, I've talked to some of the Sasquatch and the Sukaloo. They claim they were born here. I personally have always wondered if these were something that the government engineered, because these things are killers. That's what they do. They hunt the Sasquatch, they hunt the Dogmen, they hunt our humans, and they are extremely violent and extremely strong. I am not going to say they don't have paranormal abilities. The ones that I've had to deal with, I've not seen them use them. They are not something that are easily killed. And where our Sasquatch are extremely strong, the Gugwe can even bypass that. But you are going to feel such a severe negative energy when they come around you. You're going to want to get out of there. And again, running doesn't do any good. They can outrun you in a heartbeat. There have been stories where, and I think it was like a year or two ago, I had heard about a couple that had a cabin, and they thought they had Sasquatch that were coming up into the backyard, because what little they had seen of them was from the back, and it looked like a Sasquatch, and it was not. It was a Gugwe. And they were actually out in the yard when these things attacked. The woman did make it back to the house. The husband did not. Like, they are just vile, and all they think about is what they can kill. And they will go after the Sasquatch. They will go after the Dogman. They really are fearless. Nothing seems to turn them away. Are they all over the place? Yes.
Is there a big population of these things?
Not as much as the Sasquatch, but there's plenty of them. I've not noticed in my experience that they are as heavily populated. No. And they do tend to be a little bit more in the lower states, but do not rule them out in the other states as well, because they are everywhere. I think there's a higher concentration in the southern states, but they are all over the place. They're out west, they're up north, they're everywhere.
When did they start popping up?
That I really couldn't tell you. As far as what I know of them, they've always been around. They aren't like something that just started showing up 5 or 6 years ago. But I think people, they tend to hide away from humans more. They stay out in the background. They really and truly, I don't know what it is about them. They will go after the Sasquatch without even blinking an eye. I mean, they'll go after a dogman. They'll go after anything. And a lot of things sometimes that the Sasquatch get blamed for, not that they're innocent, because we know there's some bad, but a lot of things that the Sasquatch get blamed for as far as injuries to people are actually not a Sasquatch, they're a Gugwe. I mean, the Sasquatch get into trouble too, but a lot of times it is a Gugwe.
But how are people supposed to tell the difference?
Mostly you're going to see the snout. They really and truly have a face that is more like a baboon. And you've got that pronounced snout. It's not even a dog-like snout. It's like, if you look at a baboon, you know, if you Google a baboon on the internet, you're going to see it's a snout that's wider and more squared. And that's what these things have. And that's how you're going to tell more than anything, because they are large like a Sasquatch, and in some cases larger. But they do have that pronounced snout. Now, there are hybrids that are a Sasquatch dogman. I have a photo of one that was born on my property years and years ago. And she looks like a teddy bear in the face. But these Gugwe, they have that squared snout that comes out. It is much more square. It doesn't look like a dog. It looks just like a baboon and the shape of it. They are not anything to play around with. They are not anything that you think you're going to talk your way out of it. You know, where people have had encounters with a Sasquatch and just kind of stood there and let the Sasquatch, you know, make their way around them and leave, or they've backed away from it. It does not work with these things. They are literally deadly. And I really feel like, you know, we have missing people that come up now and then and various things. And I'm not saying they're all Gugwes, because they're not. But the thing is people are so afraid of the Sasquatch and the dogmen out in the woods, and those are really the least of your problems.
When did you first hear your first report on these Gugwe?
Oh, geez. I had heard about them in my 20s, but not a lot. I think it became more prevalent to me in my 40s that I really, you know, more people were talking about them. And then as I've gotten older and I've worked with more people had shared their stories, and I started getting more inside information on different things with them. And I think that had a lot to do with it. We had one, very seldom do I have them come up by me. And it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago that I did not see it. The only reason I knew it was here was because the energy shifted. It was very violent. My animals were acting crazy, and the Sasquatch did run it out of here, and they killed it. But a lot of times these things will overpower a Sasquatch. And the Sasquatch, when they do kill them, that once they get them on the ground, they rip the heads off of them.
Are they extremely territorial, or are they rogue?
You know, I have had certain Sasquatch say that they have an area that they stay in. To me, from the people that I've talked to that have encountered them, from what I've seen in my lifetime, I would say that they're more rogue. I think they have a territory, but I also think that they may go back to, because they do have certain places that they hold up at, but they are very good at covering a lot of ground. They aren't going to stay in just one little spot. They actually seek out problems. They seek out to cause havoc. Like, they may live at point A, but while they're living in point A during the day, they're going through the rest of the alphabet and walking all around and causing chaos.
I mean, just having this conversation is a little intimidating.
Very. And it's really, you know, because the body type isn't exactly like a Sasquatch, but because we know that the Sasquatch are very diverse in how their build is and what they look like. I mean, they're just as diverse as we are. And I truly believe that even though we do have bad Sasquatch, and we do have Sasquatch that can hurt people, but I do believe that a lot of it is a misidentified Gugwe, just because they are so incredibly violent. They are like these big giant killing machines. I've not heard any type of evidence or reports from anybody where these things were not being violent. And I think, like I said, because they do have a body that isn't exactly like a Sasquatch, but in the middle of something that terrifying, you would see that body type and automatically go to the Sasquatch because that's the first thing that will come to your mind. You're not going to be focused on that face. Extremely muscled, extremely strong, and they pretty much do whatever they want to do. They go where they want to go. They do what they want to do. In my opinion, they are not as many of them as a Sasquatch at all. But the ones that are there are bad enough. So they may not have as many, but they're pretty bad. I was very fortunate. That was the first time I've ever had any actually try to come onto my property. And I only found out about it because of the reaction of the animals, the energy changed. And then I was contacted by the Sasquatch and they told me to stay in the house, but not to worry, they took care of it. And it was like, thank God I have, friends in good places because, what are you going to do? Us as a human are very limited to being able to stop these things. There's no reasoning with them. Like I've been out in the woods before and if the Sasquatch were out there and not so much talk my way out of it, but just stay calm and collected, and they will pretty much just go on about their business. They would rather not have an altercation. That is not how the Gugwes are. They not only want the altercation, they want death.
And on that note, it's a bright, shiny time to say goodnight to Robin. And big thank you. Tell us quickly, 10 seconds. Nebraska Bigfoot Conference, when is it?
Oh, April 25th and 26th at Fauner Park, Grand Island, Nebraska. Our own Dave Scott will be there, as well as a lot of other really great people.
Wherever you may be, thank you to everyone in our chat room, YouTube, Twitch, Elgin, Facebook, Breaker, LinkedIn, Space Travelers Club, and on X,
I know you're out there somewhere.
Remember, this show is copyright by Bigfoot Broadcasting Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us. Because together, my
Stay in
friends,
line, don't make a mistake. We're watching.
we know the time. We want you to fall.
I know you're out there somewhere. Watching me.
Yes, the blue train has docked for the night. But soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Sheets are available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night, everybody. Way to go, Robin.
Thank you, sir. It was fun.
It was very, very fun.
I need to get with you next week sometime, and I've got to get all your information and get your flight booked
Okay.
because I can't find what I did with it from last year.
That's okay.
All right, sweetheart. Love you guys. You have a good night.
Much love.
Bye.
Good night, Robin Haynes, everybody. All right. Are we be? There we go. Who's on tomorrow night? Tim Tactics. Human and ET relationships. Maybe it happens on OnlyFans. I don't know. Big thank you tonight to T-Bone, Blue Cruise, Mel WD-40, Pam, Fast Hemi, Big Dog ×2, and CS. Greatly appreciate the love. I will see you guys all tomorrow night. We'll make it happen. We'll have some fun again. Hopefully my hair will look better. And we'll talk some ETs tomorrow night on the show. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.
Stay healthy, my friend.
You too.
You need bail money, give me a call.
Always, Dad. Take care.
You too.